You know, Russ, we called last week's episode Sexually Promiscuous in the end, thinking we'd get all these like 1 million downloads or something like that. But I don't know. I think people are kind of staying away from the sax. I don't know what that's all about.
They might be scared.
You think?
They might not want to click on that title when there's anyone else around.
Yeah, or maybe it was just too close to, COVID or something. I don't know. It kind of made them nervous.
There could be a lot of saxless people out there now, though,
There's another good name for an episode in the future. We could call one of our episodes like Saxless People.
Sexless Whisper or something.
Yes. That reminds me. I heard an album this week by a band that old that you wouldn't have thought would be good, but it actually is. Do you remember Tears for Fears from the 80s?
I do.
Yeah, in fact, we heard on a recent jazz album, actually it was from last year somewhere, we heard Everybody Wants to Rule the World. I think somebody had done that. But they have a new album out. This is their first album in like 18 years or some crazy thing like that, and it's actually really good. Well, it's kind of fairly sophisticated pop, as their things are, and they always have these kind of their lyrics are all based on some kind of psychological kind of system, and it's just really interesting. I liked it. Anyway, anyone looking for an adult pop album,
it must be more like geriatric
Tears for Fears,
pop
The
by
Tipping
now.
Point. I enjoyed it.
Oh.
Yeah, didn't bring me back to college. It's actually kind of, because those old albums, they use all those synths, and it really does kind of put those albums squarely in the 1980s. But this one, I think they're using a lot of acoustic instruments, and I think that's always wise because that doesn't get old. You just kind of, that'll still be valid 20 years ago. Although I still like those old albums, but then again, I grew up then, so.
Well, that sounds interesting. Brings me back to junior high school or something like that.
Oh, junior high. You're younger than me, aren't you? I was in college for that. Yeah. Anyway.
Well,
so what do we have? What's the name of our podcast?
This is adult music. Not geriatric music. Not yet. Adult music.
Not yet. Coming soon. It's like the Beach Boys, right? They're still the Beach Boys.
That's right.
They should change the name to the Beach Geezers.
The Beach Geezers. Yeah. Anyway, we're Adult Music, the podcast with music for the mature mind. And
that doesn't include us, of course, but it's you, listener.
That's the listeners, right? And each week we'll bring you, on average, 6 recordings. There'll be 3 in the classical arena, 3 jazz releases. Sometimes we cross over into other genres or have something in between.
I think I'm going to be doing that soon, in fact. I've got kind of an interesting jazz release I want to talk about.
Yeah, and
that kind of crosses over into classical a little bit.
Yeah, we're not tightly bound by our definitions. We can be inspired from other things.
Yeah, one day we might do 10 albums each and do like an 8-hour marathon episode. You never know. I can't imagine doing that. This is hard enough as it is.
Hard, yeah. Last week was our sax-themed episode, and this week we're going to be brassy.
We're not just going to be brassy. We're going to be, shall we say, horny, aren't we?
Horny, yeah.
Yeah. The horn.
In a brassy way, yeah.
Horny in a brassy way.
Yeah. So that's going to be the theme of this episode.
Brassy would be a good name for an episode with all brass, really. Yeah. But different kinds of brass. Yeah.
So mainly in the trumpet realm this week with some oddball trumpet kind of things going on here, too.
Yeah, there are a lot of oddball, including one in classical, too. I managed to get one in there.
So that's what you got to look forward to. And if you're wondering what the music we're talking about is, if you just clicked on us and you don't know how to follow what we're doing, if you're not a regular listener yet, you'll see in the episode description links to Spotify and Apple Music for everything we'll discuss. Also, at the top of the podcast description for the episode, there's a link to the full playlist. You can get all the music in one place. This week, everything's available on streaming, and that will be on Deezer, our preferred streaming platform. You can listen to everything in CD quality, and you can also listen to the podcast there if you want. Just look us up, at Adult Music Podcast. And if you can't see that description or any of the links on whatever app or platform you listen to us on, jump over to our host site on Podbean, and all the episode links are easy to follow there. Now, if you enjoy the podcast, please do follow or subscribe on whatever app or platform you listen to us on. If you take just a moment to give us a ranking or write a review, that helps us get listed in the browsing category recommendations, and then we get more listeners, and that makes us happy. Also, now you can find us on Facebook. We got a page going there. You can leave a message or comment there as well. And if you'd like to contact us directly with any comments or questions, we'd be happy to hear from you. We will write back. Our email address is adultmusicpodcast, all one word, @gmail.com.
Yeah, we can guarantee we'll write back because we hardly get any messages. So we respond to all of them.
Well, yeah, I shouldn't say I'll definitely write back because we do get some really weird ones. I guess once you put your email address out there online.
Oh, you get some we get a lot of ad ones that you got.
Weird ones that
like junk mail and stuff. Yeah. All right. So anything else going on here? Well, I don't know. Anyway, here at the oasis that is adult music, let's just jump in to this week's classical releases. Are you ready to go?
I'm ready.
All right, here we go. I generally like to. Now, next week, by the way, I'm not going to have a Baroque recording. I know this, but I generally like to start with Baroque because I think that's a good way to start your day. And I'm going to recommend that listeners do that. Baroque music just feels so good, like early in the morning. Anyway, this is a vocal one by a soprano, French soprano, and I've got two pronunciations for her name. We've actually already talked about her on a previous podcast early in 2021.
Tonight's going to be really rough on pronunciation.
It certainly is.
I'm looking ahead at my notes and thinking, help us.
we really should have thought ahead, when we started this podcast as to, we don't have to write these names. We actually now have to say them. And this is a bit of a problem. Okay. So anyway, our composer's, our soprano's name here, I've heard pronounced two ways. It's either Sabine Devieilhe or Sabine Devieilhe. Now, I'm going to opt for Devieilhe because I think the H is kind of at the end, the HE is replacing the double LE, which would be pronounced Devieilhe. So I'm just going to take a shot in the dark there and say that's how you pronounce it.
All right.
Anyway, I wish I did know the way she would want it pronounced because I think she's one of my favorite sopranos, along with Marianne Crabassa, who we talked about 2 weeks or 3 weeks ago. All right, but this is a pretty straightforward program of music by Bach and Handel, and so soprano Sabine Devieilhe, ensemble is Pygmalion, conducted by Raphaël Pichon, and this is on the Erato label. Did you know Erato, by the way, is one of the 9 muses? She's the muse of. It's kind of easy. This is an easy mnemonic for this because Erato and erotic. Okay, so she's the muse of erotic poetry in the ancient Greek world.
I think I did learn that once. But
I just
another good point showing how music connects to all the rest of culture.
Right. There are a lot of classical record labels that are named after individual muses, by the way. Anyway, I'll get to why I picked this particular. Well, I picked it because she's on it, but and I wanted to hear it. But I especially wanted to talk about this one because of the program, which is really interesting. Okay, it's all Bach and Handel, and you would think, oh, okay, but this turns out to be pretty intriguing. I thought. Okay, we start out with a sacred song. There's a little appetizer here before we get to the first cantata. We get a sacred song by Johann Sebastian Bach, Mein Jesu, was für Seelenweh. I don't speak German at all. This is BWV 487, verses 1 and 3. So I think they cut one verse out. First of all, there's a gorgeous vocal on this. One of the things about this that struck me right away is how well recorded the entire ensemble is, and Devieille's voice. She sounds fantastic. Sopranos are really hard to capture. I've been an audio engineer in the past, and they tend to really, when they hit these really high notes, they tend to really pin your meters. But she's been captured extremely well here, and she does get a few high notes off during the program. So I really enjoyed this, and there's a lute accompaniment to this, and it's really just wonderful. I liked it a lot. The voice is well focused with an appealing tone, and nice phrasing, and a very clear recording. I like the way the lute is clearly audible and followable throughout, even underneath, even while Devieilhe is singing. Her voice matches well with it, and we're recording this now in Lent. Lent has started in the Catholic Church, the lead up to Easter. We're recording on the first Sunday of Lent, actually, here in Japan, where they don't celebrate Lent. Well, Catholics do. There are very few of them, though. We're kind of sandwiched in between, Korea and the Philippines, where there are a lot of Catholics in the Philippines. In Korea, there are a lot of Christians. And here we are in Japan, where there aren't much of either. Anyway, this track deals with Jesus' passion, and so it's pretty appropriate for the season. In fact, a lot of these are going to be sort of religious themes about transgression and forgiveness and nice things like that. It's a really, dare I say, a healing program, spiritually healing, as we'll find soon enough. Second track, Bach, Sinfonia to the Cantata, Wir müssen durch viel Trübsal. BWV 146. This is an instrumental, and I think it's there to separate the voice in the first track to the voice in the cantata, which is coming up. Also, Pygmalion, the ensemble, are the stars here too. They're sort of equal stars with Devieilhe, so I think they wanted their moment in the sun too, and they deserve it because they're pretty fantastic. This is a familiar Bach melody in this piece. Symphonia to this cantata, BWV 146. I never realized that this was... I never heard the cantata version of this before, because I know this theme as the opening movement of Keyboard Concerto No. 1 in D minor, BWV 1052.
That's where I know it from too.
Yeah, he lifted this from his earlier cantata using the keyboard concerto. Which often happens in Bach. Research in the 80s really started finding this out, and people were really disappointed because they wanted Bach to be one of those total originals like Beethoven was, But
he was a recycler.
He was a recycler, but he was I think a bigger super genius than Beethoven was. And but the thing is, that was just what was done in his age. Vivaldi being the all-time recycler. He had several of the same works republished by people in different countries so that he could earn several salaries off it. A practice that I approve of personally, because I would do it if I could. Maybe that's the Italian in me talking. I don't know. I
like the organ in this one particular here. It comes through very clearly in the arrangement, and it was good to hear this version of it. It's very spirited
I enjoyed
too.
The old style organ on this track. It's like an old one. Gorgeous sound. The rhythm is pinpoint perfect. on this.
It's got motion, but it's not too fast. It's just locks in nicely.
Right. Excellent blend on the ensemble. And I like the way the very neatly playing ensemble crash into the dissonant chord right before the keyboard cadenza in the middle of the track. I like it when you're just kind of heading somewhere and suddenly there's this dissonance and it all just goes and just sort of they take that exceptionally well. It's a really nice moment right around the middle, so you can. I'm sure you'll hear it. It's pretty noticeable. There's a pretty psychedelic dissonant chord near the end of this movement, and the dissonance is on the ending. It's really nice. I liked it too, the way they take it there. All right, next we get to the reason I wanted to hear this recording because of this cantata. Mein Herz schwimmt im Blut. My heart, Herz, I think, swims in blood. Okay, BWV 199. This is one of my favorite Bach cantatas, and it's a bit of a miraculous composition. It's basically about the singer at the beginning is like this person who has sinned and they're feeling terrible about it. And then they turn to God and they plead with God for forgiveness, and they get that forgiveness, and it ends in joy. All right. Now the lyrics are a bit extreme, shall we say? But the music kind of follows that from the darkness to the light, like perfectly. And it's almost like it's giving you the experience of going from this dark place to something lighter and more joyful. And I just feel like it almost transforms the listener. And I really wonder what this must have been like for people alive at the time, because they didn't have the ear pollution that we have today. Yeah, when we hear, say, an augmented fourth, I mean, we really don't. We just think it's cool, But like as you can hear in our adult music theme. But back in Bach's day, it would have been a horrifying sound. So these sounds sort of it wasn't really considered musical. But so if you think about that, about how much more sensitive people's ear to what counted as music to people back in that day, before there was machinery and engines and things like that. If you think about it, the loudest song you ever could have, well, I don't know about the loudest, unless there was a war and you heard cannons, which are very, very loud. The loudest sound you would hear is just really, animals, I guess.
Yeah.
Cows. Maybe a lion or something. Well, you wouldn't even hear a lion unless you were in Africa, so.
It'd be too late. That'd be the last thing you heard.
Yeah, I know. Right? And you wouldn't be able to go back and tell people about it. Anyway. Okay. The singer really beats herself up in the beginning of this. Okay. I feel like also this is a great, aside from the way the singer really beats herself up in her remorse in the first recitative and aria, this is a theme we really need to absorb today in this time of eternal condemnation on the internet. You just get damned and you just got to stay there forever. And I really think this is a work that people need to hear, and just so they get it, what forgiveness is all about. It's a work I love, and let me talk about it here. Track 3, number 1 is the recitative, Mein Herz schwimmt im Blut. The singer sings of her disgust and sense of hopelessness at feeling irredeemably separated from God by her sins. Textually, it's very full on. And if this were a modern work, this would be the end of the work right here, because that's where we are on the internet. We just have to stay like that forever. But luckily, we have the forgiveness of the divine. So we get to track number 2, an aria, Stumme Seufzer, Stille Klagen. So the stage is set, and we hear her emotions about her lowly state. This is what Baroque arias are all about. The action stops, and you sing about your emotions. Usually they're two contrasting emotions. Here we hear this particular performance is taken slowly and heavily by the ensemble, I guess, to get a sense of that heaviness of the soul in this state. It's an appropriate approach, but the melodic vocal material is very appealing, and I think it sounds nicer at a slightly faster pace. That's okay, though. We have a great singer here. Devieilhe's voice is light and appealing. The slow speed heightens the pathos and sorrow. The phrases are all beautifully shaped by the ensemble, and there's a great dissonance again on the word gebüßt. It's harshly taken and satisfyingly so. This is a very long lament at 8 minutes. So if you're wallowing in sorrow during this, stick with it, because good stuff is coming up. We've been hearing a lot of weeping downward figures up to this point, so the strings will go like, That's kind of like a musical symbol of weeping, crying, that kind of thing, that kind of sadness. This turns around in the next recitative, which is called Doch Gott muss mir gnädig sein. I should have did a translation of this. God must hear me or forgive me. I don't know what gnädig is. Okay. Here the penitent realizes that God must have mercy on her, so she asks for mercy, with the music brightening with her hope at redemption. Now, if you're listening to this and you're not really a big music listener, you want to listen to how the music lightens and brightens as the cantata goes on. It's almost like it's giving you the experience of this singer. Then the very beautiful number 4 aria, Tief gebugt und voller Reue. This is the centerpiece of the cantata and my personal favorite in it, where the balance between remorse and happiness is achieved. It's also another very long one. The singer says to God she acknowledges her guilt and says she's remorseful, but asks for God's patience. I find this very moving. Devieilhe sings it clearly and with feeling. And I can't, personally, I've heard obviously older recordings of this, and for me, I can't shake the beauty of Emma Kirkby's version throughout. I really love that one. She had such an angelic voice, and you were hoping for her forgiveness too, because she just sounded so great. Dawn Upshaw's version moved me as well, and this one does too. But it's just a newer one, and I think I have to take on this new voice, because the other ones are so familiar to me. But at the moment, I kind of am favoring those. I'm going to have to put this on a lot more. This particular version is so clean in recording and performance that it invites repeated listening. The last line of the text before it repeats, Habe doch Geduld mit mir, which means have patience with me, is very movingly sung by Devieilhe. Gorgeous melody throughout that sticks with you. Okay, the tables are turned. God has heard her prayer, and we have the recitative Auf diese Schmerzenreue. This very brief recitative, recitative? See, I don't even know how to say these words, because I know recitativo in Italian, so it sounds like an artificial English word. Telegraphs coming words of comfort, which we hear in the chorale on the next track, which is called Ich dein betrübtes Kind, your penitent child. The penitent casts her sins into Jesus' wounds, as she says, where salvation comes from. There's more where salvation came from when he was crucified. There's more confidence in the vocal line here, so she's kind of added this confidence to her voice to show, this is part of her interpretation, that the vocalist has faith in what's going to happen to her. It sounds rather carefully constructed, as though the vocalist doesn't want to err. The accompaniment, on the other hand, is very busy. Now, this is a chorale. These are usually harmonies, and they're very simple to sing because they're supposed to be sung in church by the congregation who aren't professional singers. So this is not the most exciting aria, but it's still really beautiful because of all the filigree work from the orchestra. Number 7, this is track 9, recitative, Ich lege mich in diese Wunden. This soothing recitative features the vocalist finding a resting place in faith. Her voice has noticeably lightened here. And then we get to number 8, the final aria, Wie freudig ist mein Herz, how joyful is my heart. Here we get sheer happiness as the vocalist sings at how joyful her heart is at reconciliation with God and really with herself. Beautifully taken here, and the ensemble communicates joy in their high-stepping rhythm and individual melodic lines as well. This is a satisfying performance, even if I can't get my favorite ones out of my ear. I suspect that this will become one of my favorite performances as I hear it more. This might be the best recorded version of this that I've heard, and that combined with the performance might win the day. And I love the way in this piece that Bach's music shadows the mood of the words as they start in despair and weeping and slowly lift to hope and then to joy of the last aria. It almost physically lifts the listener out of any despair he or she might be feeling. So, give this particular work a listen, and I wish I could kind of sort of hack the internet and make everybody listen to this, but it's in German, so most of them wouldn't understand it anyway. I could put the translation up, They need Anyway, we move on. After this very moving cantata, we get to Handel finally, and this is we get two sections of the oratorio, Bach's Passion. I actually looked this up and didn't write anything about it, but it's a passion work, so it's for Easter. And in the first movement, the singer is Mary, Jesus' mother, and her I always say recitative here. Ach Gott, mein Sohn wird fortgeschleppt. This is a passion narrative, and Mary plays a big role in it, which is unusual. She's usually not cast she's not in any of the Bach passions. I don't think. But here she laments her son being taken to be crucified and all the good work he's done. After all the good work he's done. And then we get a duet with, we have another voice here, Stefan de Gut, baritone. So we have a soprano and baritone. Soll mein Kind mein Leben sterben and Ja, ich sterbe dir so gut. So it's two different arias sung at the same time. And this is a duet between Maria and Jesus. I don't think I've ever heard these two.
Yeah, I don't.
Because arias are usually between lovers, right? And here it's a mother and her son who happens to be God. Anyway, this is a duet between Mary and Jesus, not often heard. Mary asks, "Must you die?" And Jesus assures her, "It is for your good in heaven." Here we find out what a great recording this is, because baritone Stefan de Gut sounds fantastically clear as well. How did they do this? Great engineering, I thought. All the detail of Handel's orchestration is clearly heard, and I'm going to have to give the engineer credit here. I didn't write his name down. I should get into this habit. All right. Producer Aline Blondieu, recording engineer Hughes Deschaux. Good work, people.
It's a good recording for sure.
It is a good recording. All right, next. We had all sort of religious works so far, Christian works, and then we get, after hearing Mary, we hear segments of the opera Giulio Cesare in Egitto by Handel.
Cleopatra.
Yeah, Cleopatra, who's really very different from Mary, isn't she?
A bit.
What a change. But oddly, this the kind of trajectory she's on is sort of on the same one that Mary is in the earlier aria. So this sort of mirrors the cantata by Bach that we heard earlier, the Darkness to Light. We're kind of getting a similar trajectory here with the way these snippets are assembled. Okay, this one's also in Italian. And I have a CD of this, and in the booklet note, they've put the Italian translations in a separate part of the booklet, so I had to go searching for it. It's like, what, they didn't put the Italian text up? But they did. They're in the booklet. You just have to leaf to the end to find it. Okay, this is from Act 2, Scene 8, number 28, accompanied recitative. I'm going to say recitative. I don't like this recitative nonsense. Okay, Che sento, oh Dio. This could be the name of several hundred Italian arias. Che sento, what do I hear? Oh Dio, oh God. Quite a change of character here as we get a dramatic beginning. Cleopatra, singing in Italian, shows both defiance and tenderness at what we don't know yet. We find out in the aria that's coming up. Although if we heard the whole opera, we would know. Se pietà di me non senti, if you don't feel pity for me. Cleopatra's lament aria is a lament for her coming death. At the hands of who? Julius Caesar was long dead by the time she was killed, because she was hanging with Mark Antony, and Augustus's forces killed her. I wish I don't know this opera, so I'm gonna have to listen to it one day. I don't know. Anyway, her aria is a lament for her coming death, a good opportunity for the suffering soprano to win the hearts of the audience, and Devieilhe does so here. Okay, you're just kind of pouring your heart out to the audience. They love you. Fantastic, gently floated high note right at the end. Really gorgeous performance. Make sure you hear that high note. It's so nice. It's really soft, too. All right, back to Bach's Passion by Handel. The aria here, Erstarrt mein Herz und Blut. We get an aria sung by the personification of the Gläubige Seele, or faithful soul. Okay, the title means Hear My Heart and Blood Freeze. And we get a musical representation of that in the stop and start quality of the music, as though it's frozen in its tracks. Okay, it's kind of, it can't move forward because of the coldness of what she sees. And what she sees is the audacity of humanity to nail the Son of God to a cross. Okay, so she's looking on this personification of the faithful soul. A big thing in the Baroque era, by the way. You had all these sort of representative characters that represented certain elements of the soul and things like that. Next, we get a recitative, O Anblick, O entsetzliches Gesicht, also sung by the Gläubige Seele. This is a narration of the soul as she watches Jesus be tortured by his captors. It's supposed to be shocking and ferocious because there's a lot of really kind of horrible descriptions of what's happening to Jesus as seen from afar. But the musical language available to Baroque-era composers isn't going to put that across to contemporary ears. It all seems very soft to us, so you have to do some willful forgetting of what came in the 300 years that followed. Okay, so pretend you never heard a jet engine before. You'll be that much closer. Or even a railroad engine.
A lawnmower.
A lawnmower. Just put all those things out of your head. The world was quiet then. At least every day. The non-war world was. There were a lot of wars back then. Okay, next we have track 17. Again, going back to the opera Giulio Cesare in Egitto. Act 3, Scene 3. This is Cleopatra again. Piangerò la sorte mia. I will cry for my fate. And it's an interesting transition. The first words she sings are, I cry for my fate, so cruel, so wicked. It's a lovely lament, movingly taken by Devieilhe, as is everything on this album. The middle section is an angry promise. Okay, you always like that contrast in a Baroque-era aria. And the music really picks up and gets stormy as Cleopatra promises that her ghost will hover around the tyrant, who's unidentified, and I guess it's Julius Caesar. This section ends with a spectacularly taken high note, beautifully captured by the recording. These are hard to do. Again, a good a nod to the engineer here. Make sure you hear it. This one too. She goes back for an even more moving and softly taken pass at the Piangerò section, and then we end. Some more Handel follows from the oratorio, Il trionfo del tempo e del disinganno. And this is Italian as well. There's an accompanied recitative, pure del cielo intelligenze eterne. Here, the singer is a personification of beauty. Okay, so she's not Aphrodite, she's beauty. These figurative characters were big in Baroque opera, remember. The recitative comes at the end of the oratorio, so this is the end, and beauty is asking heaven to help her match her acts with her will. Okay. Aren't we all asking for that? Anyway, it's pretty universal even today. So this is why classical music lives on. Okay, track 19, the Aria Tu Ministro Eletto. There's a clarification of what she means here as she sings, You will no longer see faithless yearning or vain passion in my heart. And she asks that the minister of heaven, who I guess is some angel, take her new heart to God. In a way, it echoes the end of the Bach cantata we heard earlier, and I guess this whole selection of recitatives and arias acts as a mirror to the trajectory of that great work. This particular aria is spare in orchestration and touching in its vocal performance. The tenderness of the ensemble playing in the outer section pulls the ear and heart in. Beautiful and gorgeously taken, quiet ending. Then we end the recording with another Bach cantata, Jauchzet Gott in allen Landen, BWV 51. And this is just a joyful, happy work right from the beginning. It starts with an aria, Jauchzet Gott in allen Landen. It has fanfares. There's a trumpet, and whenever you're going to hear a trumpet in the Baroque era, it's going to be some kind of fanfare or happiness. The joy moves on to the heavily melismatic vocal, and boy, is it palpable. This raised my spirits high. I think it's that the entire program really has built up to this point. It's a really brilliantly conceived and executed program. It really does bring the listeners' spirits up. And I encourage everybody to hear this, especially in these rather dark days that we're living through. The text encourages listeners to exalt God. In fact, the volume of the ensemble threatens to cover the vocal, but we've got some good engineering here, as I've said, and that doesn't happen. You can hear Devieilhe being stretched in certain parts, but she comes through. This sounds like a really tough aria to sing. Number 2 is a recitative, Wir beten zu dem Tempel an, a confident statement on the blessings we receive from God and the modest praise we give that pleases Him. Number 3 is the aria Höchster mach deine Güte, a plea to God to renew His goodness to us each morning. It's got a nice rocking triplet quality. Rocking meaning like rocking a cradle, not like rock and roll rocking. Okay. Sometimes I got to be careful with these words, huh? A triplet quality to the accompaniment as though soothing the singer's soul as she sings the plea. And this is another example of what I mean by like Bach's music, kind of sort of adding extra meaning to what's being sung. So the singer's singing this plea, please renew my soul, and then that sort of rocking back and forth sort of rhythm kind of has the idea that she's in God's hands and being well taken care of. It's really beautiful. These things sort of touch me in music when you hear them, because if someone were to give you that image like I just did, you would say, ugh. It's kind of how it's a little I can't think of the word now, but a little over the top, let's say. But when you hear it musically, it really hits its mark, and it's really beautiful. There's a really pretty harp melody included with the continuo that renders the accompaniment more touching. Okay, number 4, this is track 23, is the chorale Sein Loben Preis mit Ehren. These are usually sung by a chorus, and I always think they sound really odd when they're sung by a single voice. It's a basic square melody meant for congregations, and lots of filigree in the accompaniment, so the ensemble shines here. The text exhorts the listener to praise God so that his mercy towards us will increase, which is pretty much what this entire joyous cantata is about. And number 5, the Finale and Alleluia. We go directly into this without a pause. The trumpet fanfare is back as the soloist sings Alleluia. No one could set an Alleluia like Bach, except maybe Handel, but we know his Alleluia from the end of the Messiah. And this is a really beautiful example. This is such a good program, on top of being well performed by the well-matched vocalist and ensemble, beautifully recorded. It just scores top scores in like every category. Vocalists tend to change ensembles from album to album, but this was so good. It makes me hope that these two, that Devieilhe and Pygmalion will get together again to repeat this magic. Also, I want to mention, this is all these texts are, most of them are, religious works based on Christianity, Bach being probably the most Christian of all composers. But don't let that deter you if you don't happen to be a Christian. Music, as we know, transcends everything and really brings us closer to the divine, or whatever you want to think about it as. So this will transport you as well. Okay? No belief necessary, but you might be a believer afterwards just because it's so good. Highly, highly recommended.
Yeah, I like this one much more than I thought I would going into it. Thinking it was going to be a soprano recording. I'm
glad you liked this one, because I was like, oh, no, gotta eat your spinach again.
No, I really liked it. I think with me, sopranos, being the high vocal range, sometimes to me, they can be like trumpet players in brass. They can go to excess in when they reach their higher limits. And as I've often said, I have this little button between my eyes that the sopranos can really hit when they're overpowering. But I don't find her voice like that at all. I noticed that as a vocalist, she pays very close attention to dynamics. There's a lot of subtlety in the phrasing of her lines, going from soft. I never felt that her voice was pushed beyond what was fitting musically, and I felt possibly also due to the wonderful recording quality, as you mentioned, when she did sing very softly, that was captured as clearly as well. And the other thing that was nice was always the vocal and the orchestral balance was spot on, which we've heard recordings where it's not. But here, I always felt that the voice and the instrumental parts were in perfect balance. So I really enjoyed her voice, which is not something I can say for lots of sopranos. The other thing I noticed about her, even though I don't understand much German either, is I can tell that she places real importance on enunciation.
Yeah.
Not only
clear. Everything's very clear.
So not only the pronunciation of the words, but fitting in the line and the flow of the melody. Sounds just perfect in the way that she sings. So I was really drawn to her voice there. I was blown away by some of the high notes in the Handel, just crystal clear and effortless without being strained at a high volume. So that was nice. And then this ensemble, Pygmalion, they're really wonderful. What I really think is important with Baroque music is to have the right tempo and the feeling of motion. And they really get that on all the works seem to be locked in. They're not too fast, but they have that sort of sprungness, the action in the rhythm that gives a spirited sort of tension to the pieces, and I like that a lot. And there's a lot of variety. As you said, we go from lute, we've got the nice organ, and then we end up in the Bach with this nice trumpet arrangement in there too. So yeah, and just a great overall sound quality to the recording. So yeah, I really liked it.
Yeah, a good one. I kind of want to talk about it more, but let's move on.
All right.
We're going to be here all night. Okay. The next one we have is two symphonies by the Latvian composer Tālivaldis Ķeniņš. I looked that up. Symphonies 5 and 8, yeah. And his piece Aria per corde Ķeniņš.
You're going to need like more than regular keys on the keyboard to type this name. So
yeah, I had to really search some of these out. Okay, yeah. But we're really hitting all the Soviet satellite countries in recent weeks. This guy's from Latvia, as was Petrus Vasquez. We heard him last year, and we really loved his oboe concerto. Ķeniņš is a very different kind of composer, though. This is performed by the Latvian National Symphony Orchestra, conducted by Andris Poga, and it's on the Undine label. And okay, let's go on. Talk about Ķeniņš a little. He was somebody I'd never heard of before. He was a 20th century composer, 1919 born, and died in 2008, which is, I guess, fairly long ago now. I mean, it's still kind of recent, but it's not like he was a contemporary of ours at one time. Okay, he's considered to be a neo-romantic composer. I can hear that. He's using harmonic or traditional harmony. Born in Latvia, educated in France, and after that he lived in Canada for the rest of his life. He fled Latvia shortly before the second Soviet invasion. They do a lot of invading, those Soviets.
You think?
Those Russians. I don't know. It seems to be like a national pastime. Anyway, Symphony number 5 is our first work, composed in 1976. All right, well, we're going to discuss this work that no one's ever heard, except for the handful of... Actually, probably everyone listening to this podcast has probably heard it because they're probably listening to it to hear what I'm going to say about it, right? Because he's not a composer that gets talked about a lot. Okay, so according to the booklet, the symphony formally has 3 parts of equal length. Now, you might... but in reality, it comprises a single monolithic structure. Now, if you're wondering how those 3 parts divide, because your CD or your... stream is going to have 4 tracks. The first 2 tracks are part 1, and then part 2 would start on track 3, and part 3 would start on track 4, if you want to know the formal divisions. Okay, there's a lot of narrative quality in this, and it's not a happy story. Okay, it's kind of a dark work. The first movement is, how am I going to say this? All right, the first track, which is part 1 of the 3-part work, which is really one whole thing, okay? I'll talk about it as though it's 3 parts, okay? Is Moto Animato, okay? And it's only 2 minutes long, the first track. It's sort of like the introduction. We hear the 2 main themes, or the 2 worlds. They're both irreconcilable. We hear a robust contemporary world. Okay, this is the notes now. And then a fairy tale world, which, when he says a fairy tale world, it doesn't mean like comfortable bedtime stories. I mean, it's kind of an eerie sort of, dark woods, gingerbread house in the dark woods kind of feeling, bad things are going to happen there. Which glitters with the magic of dusk in the Latvian countryside, perhaps fireflies. Okay. This all occurs in the brief track 1. It starts with the aggressive rushing theme. I guess that would be the contemporary world, with a pounding bass drum and rushing strings. It sounds pretty ominous as the violins cascade in their higher range, And suddenly the music quietens. This is like all of a sudden, and we hear that fairy-like bell percussion sounds. It's enchanting, but not in a comfortable way. It's enchanting in the way that, this magic, this malign magic, I guess would be. But we don't know it's malign yet. It just has that magical glitter to it. It's sort of otherworldly, but you don't know which way it's going to go. The music becomes aggressive again with stabbing brass and drums. And then we get to track 2, which is still part 1, remember, labeled Doppio Lento. There's no pause, a sudden slowing, and low sounds that put one in mind of vapors rising from the ground. When I hear that kind of like amorphous sort of low string sound, it kind of gives me that. There's some brass in there too, I think, or winds. A rising figure develops in the strings. And in this work, the strings are either rising or swirling, like they've been stopped by some barrier. The brass stab at this, punctuated by the drum, and when that happens, they tend to stop rising. So it seems to be like a force is coming against them. The low sound of vapors emerge again, and the music gains energy and speeds up as it makes its way to the higher frequency range. Once there, the melodic figures start circling again, the bass drum reemerges. We get a timpani and drum solo. It's brief. There's a lot of smaller percussion involved, which is very pretty. And there's a lot of woody sounds too, which I also enjoyed. A sudden silence emerges, followed by random quiet sounds, and we are done with part 1. Part 2, which is track 3, starts largo espressivo. It's a traditional type slow movement. Has a set of motifs that recall, according to the booklet, an ancient traditional melody from Ķeniņš's birthplace of Kurzeme, the so-called long call, as well as the serf's folk song of later centuries, which erroneously become a symbol of the occupied homeland among exile composers. All right, the first motif has a chiming bell accompanying the funereal theme in the English horn. This morphs into an upward moving string figure. Again, we have those upward figures a lot. Under swirling circular winds, the strings come up with a melodic theme that incorporates 2 repeating notes. The rest of the orchestra picks up that 2-note stabbing theme, though it's more of a gentle jab here. This dissipates as a clarinet plays a forlorn melody. A rather magical section emerges with light, cloud-like strings floating around a sheet percussion sound. Kind of like one of those things that they used for thunder in the theater. And the winds take up the theme and it becomes darker. We get to part 3, track 4, Vivace con fuoco. So lively and with fire, so there's going to be a lot of passion here. There's activity. We have the same activity as the first part, but there's a fata morgana, a mirage in it, according to the notes. The conclusion allows one to forget the industrial aggression, and with a light touch, the motif of the second part meanders away into nothingness at the end. Okay, the movement suddenly adopts a fast, seemingly out-of-control rhythm with veering figures. It's sort of like one of those, it feels like you're on one of those roller coasters that just kind of take these unexpected turns at a fast speed. It quietens eventually, and the melodic material begins to build up during a subtle crescendo. I like the way Ķeniņš changes the timbral texture with every phrase during this segment of the build-up. The sort of timbral texture changes to something more deliberate, with the brass playing slowly rising figures. High winds take over with chimey percussion and play something without a direction, circling. So this piece seems to be heading somewhere, then losing its way and falling back down. And this is really true of the entire work. A more aggressive brass attempt at moving to a higher key begins, and when the rest of the orchestra comes in, the direction is again hijacked, and the high winds start playing something more circular. So rising and falling arpeggios, sort of, is what I mean by circular. The rhythm slows and then stops. Low brass aggressively try to start something up again. The music slows and quietens. Chimes and woody percussion get the last say, and there's a brief quiet rumble on the timpani before the end. I guess that gets the last say. The piece has ended without arriving at a desired destination, but it has gone somewhere. Okay, so we are somewhere, and maybe we don't know where, and we'll have to work it out from there. Okay. Symphony number 8, Sinfonia Concertata, for organ and orchestra. Now, please, this is not a concerto, so the organ is really just mixed into the texture. it doesn't really have any big solo parts to it. The organist is Iveta Apkalna. And the first movement here is moderato. It's a stormy movement. Starts with 2 percussion beats and a bassoon playing a melody. The percussion and melody grow more agitated until they sound ominous. A spray of metallic percussion erupts and plays until the timpani come in again, and the music grows in ominousness. Ominous is a good word to describe this movement. We finally hear the organ interrupting the orchestra work and playing in ominous, again, sounding chords, while the orchestral figures configure into a sinister dance in response. The organ's part so far is very brief. There's a build-up in the orchestra with some punctuation by the organ. Once the orchestral material reaches a climax, the organ gets another few chords, which spur the orchestra to greater sinister heights. The music suddenly quietens as the organ lays down some quiet, low-register chords, and orchestral patterns prance above it. Another orchestral build-up features chiming percussion. It decrescendos quickly, and we hear a quiet, downward wavering theme which strings play high above with no vibrato. Another build-up and an approach to a cadence is interrupted by the low, brooding organ. There's lots of appealing percussion in this movement. It ends quietly. Yeah, there are a lot of interesting sounds in this. His themes tend to, well, in both of these works, there tends to be this desire to get to a higher place that's thwarted along the way. That seems to be a common theme with him. Second movement, chorale. This is, again, when we hear the word chorale, we should think of singing in church on chords. And this movement shape generally features a chorale figure followed by a brief commentary by the rest of the ensemble. Eerie strings begin this movement with winds. The organ plays the chorale as the winds make nature sounds, I guess, like animals in nature. But it's night nature. It's not the chirpy birds kind of thing. It's more like crows and bats or whatever makes sounds at night that make you wonder what's going on. The eerie sounding strings are playing a chorale as well. The chorale progresses gradually in the organ. It's constantly juxtaposed by winds with a low bassoon melody. I think that's a bassoon. I couldn't really tell, but it's a low reed. We finally reach a point where the orchestra picks up the chorale. After its chords, there's a kind of wavering figure underpinned by an upward striding bass. The organ plays an arpeggio figure with a spacey sound in the upper register as the strings play melodic material. The movement has a sense of forward progress at this point. It's finally interrupted by a string chorale with organ bass. Again, there are lots of gorgeous percussion effects in this movement, though they're all momentary. The strings pick up the chorale, and the winds play Stravinsky figures reminiscent of the Rite of Spring. This kind of made me think of Stravinsky a lot, in fact. The organ for the first time plays melodic figures as the strings accompany. The movement ends quietly. In the third movement, we get a toccata. This begins with a percussive explosion. A driving rhythm begins, but it's a bit lopsided with double and triple beats, I guess, with some interruptions. It's really tricky. There's a constant reaching for higher keys. Again, I've repeated this a lot. This is one thing to keep in mind when you listen to this album. You can hear the upward movement of the themes. At one point, they're beaten back down by pounding percussion underlying a chord played by the strings. We get some harsh chords decorated with chiming percussion and organ figures. Then the ensemble reaches up again. The organ stops the progress with a long-held chord, and the brass and percussion hammer at it as though the harmonic progress has stalled there. The brass and percussion hammer at the rest of the orchestra. The music quietens after a prolonged scene, after a prolonged moment of this, and there are yowling sounds from one of the wind instruments as percussion chimes. Suddenly, the harmonic field clears, all of a sudden, under chiming percussion, and we're at the end. So, sudden transcendence? Possibly. The booklet notes seem to think something like this is the case. Hard to say. All right, we get one more work. This is the Aria per corde for string orchestra, written in 1984. This starts quietly with melodic material in the cellos that slowly repeats and grows longer with each reiteration without reaching resolution. It gets interrupted each time. Finally, an upward momentum is reached, as we would expect by now from this composer. The upward figures get handed off to the violas, then to violins. higher registers, echoing the heightening of the rising of the tones. They play in harmony. And once again, as in the previous symphony, we reach a chord that gets sawed on as the cellos put out melodic tendrils beneath it. Violins break through the chords and move upward still, always hitting a new chord ceiling, then eventually breaking through until they're in the stratospheric register. They quieten as the cello melody takes precedence. As the lower strings settle down, we hear pizzicato punctuation of the rhythm. The strings play their fragmentary melodic material in low registers for a while, until an upward-moving pizzicato bass line forms. The music warms until arriving on a low-held chord, and we hear tension-loosening melodic material until we reach a satisfied ending on a quiet pizzicato chord. So this album has a dark sound world. The theme, he seems to have this kind of like striving or reaching for something higher theme that he gets thwarted from reaching often. There's a lot of things to enjoy along the way. There's a lot of interesting orchestration. The compositions are all good works. They're pretty solidly composed. There is a through line to the end, and there are magical moments in them based around timbre. I like this enough. It's going to take a little listening to kind of get familiar with. It's good for a brooding afternoon listen, I would say. Interesting, I thought. It's an interesting new composer for me to think about now.
Yeah, this one, unfortunately, I was excited about it because we were going to have an orchestral work, and then I turned up not liking it at all.
Oh, wow.
Well,
it was kind of dark. I was sort of,
it does have good timbre exploration. So he uses the full palette of orchestra. There's a lot of good low brass. What I found, as you described it, it reaches for something that gets cut off. For me,
it's a little frustrating.
Yeah, I felt like it lacks development.
Yeah.
In that things constantly seem to be ended before they're taken to the next level, and it's on to something new. And so as a constant change of timbral scenery, that which is, keeps it moving along. But I kept waiting for something to, come back, get redeveloped in a new way, built upon, and I just don't get that kind of satisfaction from it. So I was getting frustrated through a lot of it, and the notes are all in praise, especially of the organ. Use of the organ, but I was really thinking I would be depressed if I had to play this on the organ because
you don't really get any chance in the spotlight, but you're not supposed to here. I don't think.
So I was thinking, Latvian composer, because we really enjoyed the Vasques before.
Well, he's a very different composer too, and he's also younger.
I was, just hoping there was going to be some kind of national kind of commonality or something, but this one, try as I may, I don't know.
I think he lived in a darker time though than Vasquez does.
Yeah, I'm sure. I was looking. Oftentimes we talk about national character.
More to be happy about. Yeah.
We talk about national characters in music and things, but I couldn't really pull much out of this, other than interesting sound colors and like that.
It's not really an easy listen. It's going to take getting used to, even for me. But I don't know. I guess it was okay. I liked it enough, I thought. Okay. I might give it another listen. Not to see. Give it a listen yourself, listener. It's free.
Yeah.
Just go to... let us know.
Stream it and see if you can.
Okay, next we had a fascinating album, especially as far as the soloist goes. 9 trumpets and 1 piano, trumpet music from around the world. Not a bit of a misnomer because it's not really from around the world. It's really from 3 or 4 places, but most of them in Latin America. But this is by the Brazilian, what can I call him? Hornist? I don't know. Fabio Brum, because he plays 9 different kinds of horn on this album. And his pianist, the one piano is Santiago Baez. And what a pianist this guy is, man. He has to play some really complicated rhythms, and he puts them across really beautifully throughout the album. This is on the Naxos label. I want to say something about the Naxos label. The Naxos label is a bargain label, and people kind of think that they get what they pay for, sort of things, with classical music as well. Not the case with Naxos. Just because you're paying less, you're not getting worse performances by any means. These are really top flight usually. They just usually don't have to pay these big stars like gigantic salaries so they want to make a lot of money. So if you're going to buy a CD, Naxos CDs are a good way to go. They're bargain priced, and they're usually great performances and well recorded as well. In fact, Wranitzky's on the Naxos label.
Well, I should say, I guess you could tie it in with Wranitzky and this. So Wranitzky was music that, was going unheard. Yeah. And, as we spoke with Daniel and Merrick about it, one of the problems with any kind of music, but it's a problem in classical music, is getting things on a program that people haven't heard of before.
Right. Well, even if you do get it on the program, they might not even come to hear it, so you have to pair it with something
sandwich
like really well known that they'll want to hear.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's great that a label like Naxos will get out, that music, Wranitzky, which, comes from the classical period. It's not like it's new contemporary music. It's kind of new to most listeners, classical era music. And here, what I felt as a trumpet player myself, there's a big problem with trumpet repertoire, as an instrument compared to, other instruments, because everyone knows the piano repertoire and violin by all famous composers. But trumpet has kind of a problem, there's the standard fare, the Haydn and Hummel, and you get into modern things, Hindemith, and most of the other kind of compositions, the repertoire people don't know. And it's not that there's not a lot of really good music out there. It's just that it doesn't get recorded enough, and it's hard to become familiar with it. And so here, some of this music is kind of unusual, but it's all really interesting. And, you wouldn't get to hear it.
It's all contemporary, too. Yeah. That's another important point. All these composers are not only alive now, but very young. Right. Some of them are our age. Yeah. They're middle-aged. Nobody's old. Let's just put it that way.
And otherwise, unless a recording like this comes out and Naxos takes a chance on this, you're not going to hear this music. So it was a good opportunity to hear some, contemporary trumpet music. It makes you feel that, trumpet music, classical music isn't sort of, locked in a vault from bygone eras. And you've got this performance. The only thing I can say, well, maybe I'll talk more about it at the end. I was disappointed with the sonics on the recording.
Okay.
Yeah, but I'll talk about that when we get to the end of it.
Okay, I thought that actually sounded pretty good. You have to tell me. All right. Okay. I didn't hear this on a great stereo like you did. Okay, so this is all contemporary composers from the Americas, Spain, and England, which I would hardly consider to be around the world, living in Japan as we do. Okay.
Part of the globe, a slice of the world.
Yeah, it's one slice of the globe, All right. All of the music contains elements of jazz and folklore originating from each composer's homeland. When they say jazz, they're using that in a very wide meaning. So, like Brazilian jazz, for example, would be like those Brazilian rhythms or things like that.
I would say that the sort of jazz harmonies and rhythm influence that comes through in contemporary music are used. In some sections more than others in some pieces.
Yeah. It's kind of funny what you were saying, by the way. Classical music hasn't really... There are a lot of great solo works for individual brass instruments that just don't get played much.
Yeah.
Because I think jazz came along and sort of set like brass instruments free. They got to solo and really be the star finally. But it's a shame. There is great stuff in classical music too, and it should be heard more. Yeah. I agree. But I wonder if it's just because we associate... brass instruments with jazz so much that we don't really, hear these classical works. I don't know. It's a bit of a puzzle, but there's certainly like tons of music out there that hasn't been heard, and we're covering quite a bit of it here on this podcast, but only a tiny slice. I mean, there's so much.
Yeah,
it's really crazy. Yeah,
but I mean, this is exactly what we've got here on this recording. Is exactly what I'm also trying to do on the jazz side. You can find the same names over and over in the awards shows and the magazines and on the major labels, and they're easy to find. But what about all this other music? It's sort of lost in the mix of what's available now. So we want to point those kind of things out. And I think this recording, if you're a trumpet player, definitely want to give this a listen.
I think you're definitely going to have to hear this.
Yeah, not only for the virtuosity of Brum, but also for the selection of music, because you've probably never heard these works before, and they're really surprising.
Well, you definitely haven't heard them before, because most of them were written in the last 2 years.
Yes.
And you were probably in your house kind of like not allowed to go out to a concert. All right. But anyway, let's go through this.
The only thing is you're not going to be able to play them, not because they're difficult, but you're going to need to go to the music store and buy a bunch of different instruments to play them.
I know you're not going to be playing all of these, especially and some of these pieces have several different horns in one piece. Yeah. Which I'm going to have to defer to you two when we get to some of those.
Well, I should say, at first I was glad you sent me the album notes.
Yeah,
but then they didn't help very much at all anyway. So.
They did help a little. At least I knew what the instruments were. Yeah.
Sometimes, yeah. Sometimes.
They weren't, yeah. But anyway, it's kind of these contemporary composers writing for this soloist. And whenever composers do this in these days, they're always doing some sort of personal kind of almost jokey thing, and that drives me crazy. I mean, we can handle something serious, especially now, it'd be nice,
Right.
I wanted to bring this element of his technique out or something like that. Anyway, the first composer here is Daniel Freiberg, and he's from Argentina, born in 1957. So he's older than us, but based in New York now. And this is called Preludio Carioca. And this one features a cornet in B flat. So that's horn number 1. I'm going to count the horns for you. There are 9 of them. Okay, this is number 1, cornet in B flat. Carioca is a native of Rio de Janeiro, by the way, where the soloist Brum grew up. The composer's intention is to remind Brum of his childhood. See, this is what I mean. Yeah, you're kind of like saying something about this, soloist that you yourself don't really know. But of course, the music, you'd be, you and I talk a lot about the music we heard when we were growing up in the 80s. Like we talked about, Tears for Fears. It was just around,
Right.
It's not like today where you listen on the, you can just choose your own personal music on the internet. When we were in college, we were all more or less listening to the same music,
Yeah.
And it was kind of like a shared thing between us. And I wonder if that still happens, really. Anyway, this piece is loosely based on the Brazilian chorinho, a popular song form that played a major part in the development of bossa nova, Brazilian jazz, and samba, according to the booklet. I like the burnished tone of the cornet here. It comes through clearly. This rhythm sounds like an old Cuban dance to my ear, like the Orchestra Apkalna recording that we heard, but it's not Cuban at all, according to the composer. It's a Brazilian rhythm. Actually, it has a little bit of, to me, a tango element too. Something Argentinian. Maybe I'm just hearing that because I know the composer's from Argentina, but he's claiming it's all Brazilian. Maybe he just couldn't keep the Argentinian element out because it's who he is. Sort of like when Dvorak wrote the New World Symphony and used all those folk themes.
Right.
There's a lot of Czech sounding folk themes in there too. He just almost couldn't help himself.
So we should say, for listeners who may not be familiar with these different instruments, the cornet and trumpet are basically the same length of tubing, but the bore is different. And so when you have a cornet, it's going to have more of a rounded tone. It was used a lot in brass bands rather than trumpet. And a lot of the solo literature for music in earlier centuries was for cornet, like brass band music featured a cornet soloist rather than a trumpet soloist. Because a little bit rounder, more lyrical tone than trumpet.
Yeah, Big Spiderbeck played the cornet, right?
Yeah, okay. Played cornet. It used to be more popular in early jazz. I actually started out playing on a cornet before I got my first trumpet. And basically the same instrument overall. Cornet looks a little more compact because it's the tubing is wrapped differently with a little different bore. But
this work is in ternary form. It has a slow middle section, and the cornet plays this nice legato melody.
Light and agile type of playing. I think that suits the instrument well.
And then the original melody comes back, and there's a cute wink at the end of this piece.
Yes.
I really liked it. Okay. Next, Gilson Santos, born in 1977, so this guy's younger than us, in Brazil, and he today is based in Rio de Janeiro. And this piece is called Kanzua. This features a cornet in F. Now, different than the B-flat one. This is a higher cornet, and if you really feel a need to separate your listeners' heads from the rest of their body, this would be a good instrument to use. It's a very bright sound.
Unusual instrument, too.
Yeah. Okay, so anyway, the piece, Kanzua, this comes from the Yoruba language of West Africa. Kanzua is the house where candomblé religious ceremonies take place. This work was conceived to show a bit of the magical, colorful sounds of Afro-Brazilian songs and the rhythmic richness of the drumming that accompanies rituals and dances to the orixás, which are deities of the religions of Yoruban influences, the orixás. And the rhythm they dance to is called a vasi rhythm. It's a pattern of 6 used in West African religions that are influenced by Yoruba. Leads the work, and it moves to a simple style influenced by Yongo, which is a dance and music genre from Brazil. We hear that in the middle. This rhythm it says 6, but it's complicated. It has and the cornet plays over it. The piano is really doing all the rhythmic work here. It sounds like a really complicated piece to play for the piano. The rhythm moves quickly, and the cornet has to be on his toes. Slower tempo in the middle, with the cornet playing a lyrical melody. The piano is very busy throughout this piece, so a nod to Santiago Baez here. He's really an excellent accompanist, especially in music like this. This sounds hard to play. The simpler Yongo style emerges right around the middle of the piece. We hear the Vasi rhythm again at the end, and it sounds kind of like a telegraph message on the piano, as the cornet solos lyrically above. The cornet has good stuff to play. It's a very cool ending with some squeezed out high notes, which I really rather enjoyed. Next, Douglas Braga, Brazilian composer and saxophonist, or saxophonist, as my British friends like to say, who's from Sao Paulo. This is called Cœur, from the French cœur, for heart. And he wrote this from the fact that he wrote the piece the day he first heard his baby's heartbeat. The first day, so that's why he named this piece that. This features a cornet in F in all 4 movements, and in the middle 2 movements there's also a flugelhorn in B flat. And the piece unites jazz, minimalism, French music, the sounds of the city, and the sounds of birds. And the melodies were based on 3 possible names for his coming baby, Elis Teresa Caetano. So, I guess. Okay. After those names. It's in multiple movements. There are 4 movements. The first one is labeled Allegro and has a virtuosic opening from the cornet with the piano sprinkling accompaniment in a complicated rhythm. You can hear what he's playing clearly between the cornet's pauses. At one point, there's some interesting descending swoops from the cornet. He even goes up to a high note and glissandos down, sounding like a roller coaster on a drop feels. It was pretty exhilarating sound. I like the movement a lot, especially the bright brassy sound the cornet makes in it. The canto, second movement, is a slow movement, starting with arpeggiated figures in the piano while the cornet plays. The piano part stands out in this movement for me. He gets a lot of space, and when he's playing solo, I think that's when the horn soloist is changing his instrument. It's generally a good indication that's going to come up. That was my signal. And in fact, here it's pretty easy to hear. At about 2 minutes, we hear the heavier flugelhorn in B flat. This instrument sticks to its lower register and gets off some cool low sounds, especially its last note, which is way in the depths of the instrument. Third movement, intermezzo. The flugelhorn starts this movement off with a bereft sounding solo. The piano finally comes in with some 19th century Romantic era piano figures as the flugelhorn bottoms out in its lower register. After this, the cornet in F returns with its brighter sound. He finds his way to the higher end of his register and makes a grand statement up there to end the movement. The finale is all cornet. It starts with a mechanical bass line in the piano, ostinato at first, but then breaking out of its pattern without losing its stubborn, obsessive quality, soloed over virtuosically by the cornet. The pattern is interrupted by rolled piano chords, after which a new virtuosic section starts for the cornet. The rhythm is very complicated, especially in the piano part. I really don't envy this pianist, but I do admire him, or rather I do envy his ability to articulate it. I think it sounds like a lot of work, though. Nice ringing high note in the cornet to end the piece. Next, we have Juan Carlos Valencia Ramos, Colombian composer. Oh, it's a new country. Arranger and trumpeter, born and based in Caldas. And he was born in 1978, younger than us. This piece is called Parallel, composed in 2020. Features a cornet in F and a trumpet in B flat. We've heard both of these instruments in earlier pieces. The piece shows a parallel. Oh, by the way, that's instruments number 2 and 4 of the 9, so just in case you're keeping score. The piece shows a parallel between elements of Western European music and Latin American music. The opening uses melodic and harmonic structures from late 19th century Western classical music and juxtaposes them with the cuirpa llanero rhythm of the Colombian, Venezuelan, joropo music and dance form, which we hear towards the end. I'm guessing the cornet in F starts this piece, plays an elegiac melody over chiming chords on the piano. Then we get the cuirpa llanero rhythm starting in the piano. Wow to the pianist again here. There's a changeover to the trumpet as the music reverts to its Western European profile. Juxtaposes is a good word for what the styles do in this piece. They trade off unpredictably. Like you'll hear one, the more straightforward European rhythm, and then you'll hear the really highly rhythmic Latin American one. There's a fantastic honk from the cornet at about the 2-minute 50-second mark. It's totally exposed. You can't miss it. It'll actually stop you if you're doing something else. There are occasional knocks on the wood of the piano, and in the middle, the pianist, I guess, since he's not, or it could be the trumpeter who's
There's
not
some growls
playing.
And shouts going on.
Yeah, he says, hey, and he screams at one part.
Yeah.
Okay, it all sounds fun. Whoever screams throws himself into it, and he's not mic'd when he does that. Sounds like it's coming from far away, and that's probably a good thing. I don't think I'd like a mic'd version of that coming out of my speakers. After that, good feelings come out of the Latin rhythms and the trumpet, I'm guessing at this point. At the end,
it's a
enjoyable
real rollicking
piece.
theme.
Yeah, is that a trumpet, you think, at the end?
Yeah, I think it's B flat at the end, yeah.
I was guessing. Enjoyable piece, must be fun to hear and watch in the concert hall. And a fantastically clear ending note, I said on the cornet here. It's a trumpet at the end.
I believe it switches to B flat trumpet, yeah.
At the end, stays there. Okay, we'll say it's a trumpet. See, this is why you have to see this in the concert hall, because you can see what he's playing. Okay, next we have Pacho Flores. This is track 8, Venezuelan composer and renowned trumpeter, now living in Valencia, born in 1981. Wow, he's a young guy. Actually, I guess he's not so young anymore. But boy, how the years go by. This piece is called Heteronymos, also composed in 2020. This features instrument number 5, a cornet in C, instrument number 6, a trumpet in C. I really couldn't tell the difference between these two instruments, so I'm going to need help here. The sound, like you said, the cornet sound has kind of like the wider bore, so it's going to have like a fuller sound. But in this, it's so subtle for me, especially on a recording. It was hard to hear.
Yeah, it's kind of puzzling. But he must have wanted a certain type of tonality or phrasing with that. Now, normally, the reason we have these instruments in different keys, for anyone who's not familiar with brass instruments so much, the modern trumpet that we hear in pop music and jazz is in B flat, and that came out of sort of wind bands and marching bands that play together trumpets, trombones, and saxophones, which are all in the flat keys. And so wind music tends to be written in those flat keys. So when we say trumpet in B flat, that means when you play a C on the trumpet, it's a B flat on the piano. And what that means, historical trumpets, before they had valves, you can play a series of notes with no valves just on the lips, and those intervals get closer as you go higher. So that any given instrument will be naturally in tune over those certain intervals. Now, of course, the valves shorten the tubing and make it possible to play all notes. However, there are no perfectly in tune brass instruments, and so a trumpet in B flat would tend to lend its natural harmonics and the open intervals to the flat keys. Now, however, in orchestras, stringed instruments with their tuning, E, A, D, B, G, these notes tend to favor the sharp keys. And of course, you can play in those keys on a B flat trumpet, but the intonation can be a problem. So in orchestral type of music, there'll tend to be a trumpet in C or D, which matches those keys more closely. However, here, when you're playing with the piano, in contemporary music, oftentimes they just stick with B flat trumpet, but you can do anything you want. So as you see here, we've got these F cornets. Why you would go from C cornet to C trumpet, I think, must be more of a sort of timbre type thing.
Yeah, like coloring, kind of something really subtle that he wants to achieve.
Yeah. Anyway, kind of interesting to do that.
Yeah, the piece is called Heteronymos, and it's inspired by the memory of the Portuguese poet Fernando Pessoa, who coined the term heteronym for his imaginary literary personae. The booklet doesn't really go into any detail on that.
It's an interesting idea.
Yeah. So I guess his imaginary, they wouldn't be people, they would be heteronyms, I guess. Here, the composer applies a plurality of styles, characters, and temperaments, which create a space for a new heteronym, the interpreter. Okay, anyway. Okay. I think we start with the cornet. I'm not really sure, though. The piece has an introduction, then goes into a downward moving pattern in 3/4 on the piano, which the cornet waltzes over, or whatever that instrument is. A new section starts at 3 minutes and 30 seconds after a brief piano interlude with a slower 3/4 rhythm. I'm guessing we're hearing the trumpet in C here, or the opposite. We heard the trumpet first and the cornet, because those long solo piano parts are pretty much where I think the instruments get changed. Okay, this instrument plays long-held notes as the melody for the most part, as his melody, and we get to hear the tone clearly. The rhythm suddenly changes, and the trumpet, I guess, responds with a more active melody. There's a sudden change of rhythm and tone via a piano melody, and we get a solo from the other instrument, I'm guessing it's the cornet, with no accompaniment. The piano gets some solo space afterwards, which he uses to morph the material into a new, more upbeat rhythm. And the cornet, I'm guessing again, responds with more brightly played material. The piece is enjoyable, comes across as more intellectual than the others, with its changes of instrument timbre and rhythmic material. And the instrument he uses the other instrument for the middle section, I think, in this case. I just wanted a different sound there. Okay. 9 and 10. I had trouble with this one. Santiago Baez, Spanish composer, arranger, multi-instrumentalist based in Cordoba, born in 1982, the youngest composer yet. This piece is called Serendipia, also composed in 2020. The piece emerged from a process of reflection during the COVID-19 pandemic. Yeah, right away, I don't want to hear it. But, I wish they just wouldn't tell us that, It's like...
Yeah.
Because it's just, I don't want to hear stuff about it's not about the COVID-19 pandemic, it's just his thoughts during it, I guess, his musical thoughts. Okay, it's a fluid dialogue between instruments and does justice to the soloist's musical versatility with its many horns. Okay, this is in 2 movements, and they're both very long compared to all the other works on this disc. They're both about 10 minutes long, and I think this piece, I don't know, I think it's okay as it is, but inserted into the program like this is such a long work, and we stay with this sort of harmonic language for such a long time. I thought it was a little too much for this program. So I think, I don't want to say anything about the piece, but I think it's sort of a programming, a question of programming here, of not optimum programming, let's say. Okay, my humble opinion. Anyway, the first, man, this is going to really drive me crazy trying to explain this. Each movement has several different horns in it. The first movement, we hear a flugelhorn in B flat, instrument 3. Then we hear 2 new instruments, or a new instrument, instrument 7, piccolo trumpet in B flat, and then instrument 4 again, trumpet in B flat. So we have 1 new instrument here. A bewildering array of instruments. On top of that, the piece starts in a dark place with a jagged pattern in the piano part. Very different. Yeah. It's a contrast with the entire rest of the program that we've heard so far, which was for the most part pretty joyful. I'd say we're hearing the trumpet first. For a middle section, slower than the opening, we get the heavy flugelhorn. A brief piano interlude, and we're back to the trumpet. The musical sounds like your standard Western classical rhythms with some syncopations thrown in. As the music gets serious, we get a change in timbre from the soloist, and we finally hear the piccolo trumpet right at the end of the movement after a brief piano interlude. It sounds smart alecky, like a smart aleck. It's kind of like a wisecracking type of thing in this context, playing rapid, snickering figures. The second movement features instrument 8, corno da caccia, which is a hunting horn, in B flat, and 9, a horn in F, which I'm guessing is a French horn.
Like that, I believe, right.
Yeah, and those are our 9 horns. This is the last of them in this particular movement.
Corno da caccia is also kind of rounded, looped horn as well,
Okay. It starts with a very burnished sounding horn. Total surprise. I'm guessing that's the French horn. The melody is slow and mellow, befitting a vast plain in the morning. That's the image I got. Piano accompaniment is a ticking bass note and some sprinkled harmony in the upper register. The ticking piano eventually becomes repeating chords as the melody plays over a long section. At one point, the piano erupts into high-speed material and the corno da caccia plays material with a lot of quickly repeated notes over it, I think. Later, I think it's the corno da caccia. Later, the material slows and the horn returns for a romantic melody. So this composer tends to like to do that ternary form thing where he changes the horn for the middle section. The piece ends inconclusively as the horn plays on an unresolved note. This whole piece went on for rather long, and its more European rhythmic patterns interrupt the rhythmic vibrancy of the Latin American styles that we've been hearing so far. I thought it was kind of an odd choice. But again, it was probably composed for the program. Okay. It's a good piece in itself, though. Track 11, Dimitri Cervo, or Cervo, I guess, based in Porto Alegre, Brazil. Born in 1968, so he's one of us. This is the 4th movement of his piece, Serie Brazil 2010, number 10, opus 61, As Quatro Estações Brasileiras, which means the 4 Brazilian seasons. So think the 4 seasons of Vivaldi. This is the 4th movement, Verão Nordestino, Northeastern Summer, and it's a dance. Written in 2018 to 2019, and this particular version was written in 2020. This only features a trumpet in C. This is instrument number 6 in our catalog. I don't think I numbered them all from the beginning, but this is the last movement of a 4-movement work, very rhythmically active and extremely virtuosic throughout for the trumpet, who has to play rapid repeated notes. Wow. The piano's also got some challenging rhythms. The rhythm is interrupted. The trumpet plays arpeggio patterns as a solo. We get back to the opening rhythmic material, and the piece ends triumphantly. Summer must be pretty awesome. in the northeast of Brazil.
Yeah, this has got a lot of multiple tonguing, rather than going with your tongue, which can only go so fast on brass instruments. You can do double tonguing and triple tonguing. So you you use the back of your tongue. So instead of going ta 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 ta, you go tuka 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 tuka, or like triple is tuka 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 tuka, and you do triplet things. So yeah, he's a master at these techniques. I thought this one comes off a bit etude-ish compared to the other compositions, like, something you would play that is melodic, but to build up technique.
I think it's more of like a toccata, I would think, or because it's the last of four movements that we haven't heard. We haven't heard the previous
final
three.
Variation with lots of rhythmic things added to it, but technically very impressive.
Okay, we end the program with track 12, Misha Mulov Abado, a jazz composer and double bassist horn based in London, England.
Oh.
born in 1990. That's a real change.
Yeah.
This is called Canção de Sobriedade, which means sobriety song, and it was written last year in 2021, so it's the newest work on this album. It features a cornet in B-flat, which is the first horn we heard on this album, and so it's also going to be the last. Interestingly enough, this work is an homage to the song Chega de Saudade by Antonio Carlos Jobim, which translates into English as No More Blues. And since it's called Sobriety Song, the composer made the joke that his version could be called No More Booze. Okay. The melodies in both works share a similar character and harmonic structure, and the title refers to the composer's decision to reduce his alcohol intake during lockdown after a year of pandemic, when he was started drinking too much, which was apparently a big problem at the time. We actually talked about it too in 2021, where we were just staying home and drinking all the time. You know, so you can hear us talking about that on the on last year's episodes,
right? Okay. As I pour myself another whiskey. You're
right. I'm dry tonight. I've got some tea here. Okay. I'm going for the tea. I thought I needed a little break. Okay, this has a kind of bluesy feel to the melody. Very different from what we've heard so far. The piece progresses like one of those great American songbook tunes from the 1920s and 30s. So it's got that kind of traditional style to it. It's got an appealing lyrical feel. And the second section is livelier with a jazzy rhythm, and again, one of those 1920s feels. It's pretty carefree, cheerful work in spite of the title. I thought the soloist, Fabio Brum, is just a fantastic player. He's got a great tone on all of his 9 instruments and plays fluently throughout and virtuosically where required. And his piano accompanist just keeps him in the pocket. This is really demanding playing rhythmically. I don't think any kind of conservatory trained pianist is going to go out and play music like this. It's going to take a lot of work. I think this really has to be in your soul a little bit to be able to play it this well. So this is quite an experience, and all new works, an enjoyable, lightish sort of album. A good one.
Yeah, it's really cool. I mean, I thought this is kind of trumpet players, kind of fantasy. When you, if you ever see, like,
living the dream.
If you ever see the Eagles play, like, for every song, some, roadie guy comes out with a new guitar just for that song, and it's all tuned up, so, maybe you've got a Fender on this tune, and the next tune, we're going to have a Gibson, and we're going to have an acoustic and a 12-string. And so, a new instrument for each song. Yeah, usually on trumpet, the guy's got his one trumpet. If it's in jazz, maybe you've got your flugelhorn, or in the orchestra, you've got a couple different keys. But this is like where you get to bring out all of the hardware, all kinds of weapons, bazookas in different keys and things. So that's a lot of fun. You're not going to get that on another album. And it's nice to hear these contemporary pieces. I thought they were all really interesting in their own way, incorporating lots of different rhythms, musical influences. And the musicianship is just stellar. His trumpet playing is fabulous. And as you say, the pianist is right up there to be able to play this kind of music too. The only thing I didn't like about this recording so much, as I mentioned right at the beginning, is the sonics. In a way, to me, it has a very small kind of recital hall room sound to it.
Oh, okay. I thought it was well recorded. It was clear, at least.
Yeah. The instruments sound fabulous and recorded. I thought it could use a little bit more of like a studio touch rather than this sort of recital hall kind of ambience. To me, it sounded like a live room where I was in a concert rather than a studio recording. But, the instruments and the balance between them was perfect, and I could hear everything very well. So it's just
a question of preference.
Really, I guess. Yeah. I mean, maybe that was... that was the kind of ambiance they were trying to get on. And in that case, fine. But, excellent program, really interesting. And you're not going to hear all these instruments in one place ever again. So
a unique recording. Let's just put it that way. A unique program as well. You'll probably never hear any of these works again either. I mean, they're good. They're worth hearing.
Yeah,
but I think
definitely.
They're hard to play, and they just require something special out of the soloist. You just have several horns, and I don't know.
Yeah, but this is what trumpet really needs. I mean, it needs this kind of exposure with all these, new works.
Someone... I guess I shouldn't have said that. I want to encourage trumpet players to take this up.
Yeah, I mean, it just starts with getting these works out there so people can hear them rather than hearing the same old things over and over again.
Right.
So, I think it's pretty exciting. And, definitely all trumpet players should take a listen to this, not only for the material, but the stellar technique and sound that he has on all of these instruments. Great control. Fabulous player.
All right. Okay, we are well into the horny part of the program now.
We're going to stick with horniness right to the end because I've got an all-trumpet jazz program this week. And, well, as I said earlier, my listening list is 18 pages long. Now, I have more albums than I'll ever get to. So for every kind of category I have of recent releases, I'm able to kind of pick and choose what I think will be most interesting among them. And so when I was looking at trumpet releases this time, I said, well, let me pick some things that aren't making it into the big press. There's a couple new releases that are getting a lot of attention from trumpet players. But I didn't want to pick up on those. I wanted to pick up on some things that might slip under the radar for most people. And so that's what I've focused on tonight. Be a bit international and some unique programs and also concepts, I think. So we're going to start out in France with a trumpeter, Julian Allure.
Yeah.
And what drew me to this was the sort of concept of the album, and also that it features on Fender Rhodes, Simon Chevalion.
Yeah.
Whose album Light Blue made our best album list of last year.
Yeah, both of ours, actually. We both like this in the jazz. I picked this
jazz.
one.
And so that drew me to this and said, well, definitely give this a listen. And once I heard it, I was pretty intrigued. So the recording is Light in the Box. And this is on Iveta Productions label. And features Julian Allure on trumpet and flugelhorn. Also with all original compositions by him. And this is his third album as a leader. He's got some other recordings as a sideman in different groups. And so to sort of match the concept of his compositions here, he specifically wanted Chevalion on Rhodes here. And so the nature of the program tends to be even beated funky tunes, where that sound of the Rhodes is put to best use. And I have to say, I was really impressed by Chevalion's Rhodes concept playing.
Yeah, it's sort of a distorted Rhodes sound, isn't it? It's not just the bell kind of sound that you usually hear from the Fender
He gets a nice distortion, and also, as I'll point out, I think in my notes, also uses a nice delay on some songs. So when I say he's a great pianist, as we heard last year, but he also has another side to his personality. This different concept that comes out on the Rhodes and matches here. Rounding out, we've also got Joni Zelnick on bass and Elie Martin Charrière on drums, and a little bit of vocal on one tune with Camille Berthold also on here. Okay. So we start out this recording with a tune called Serpent à Vapeur.
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 Yeah,
Like
vapeur.
Like a steamy snake or something like that.
Yeah. I think it means
like
steamed snake, like something you would eat.
Is it? Oh.
A vapeur would mean like something steamed.
Oh.
You know,
okay.
Like a bun or something.
I didn't know it was a dish.
Think.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's what I'm guessing.
Yeah. So this is a very interesting tune.
Maybe
to
he
start.
went to China or something. I don't know.
Could be. This one starts with a kind of repeated rhythmic riff on a trumpet, and then it's passed off to the Rhodes. It gets a kind of minor descending melody with an undulating rhythm to it, and the bridge has a contrasting kind of rising phrase that offsets that initial riff. The groove and meter change a lot through the sections. It sort of has this slow 3-beat feel in the first section, and then after there's a faster 4-beat groove that develops. So it's an interesting contrast in rhythm and groove. The rhythm beat also keeps the beat kind of stretching and changing up under the solos. And so it's kind of like a surfing kind of thing as the soloist here. But Allure handles that well. He navigates through these interesting chord changes here. And you'll see that he's a lyrical player. He also has a really nice warm tone on the instrument. He hits some fast chromatic lines, gets up into the upper register for climax on his solo. And then also when they come back to the melody and have kind of a vamp at the end, he has a little bit more improv time with some warmer tones at the end. So interesting rhythmic tune to start things out. Track 2, La Tortue.
Yeah.
The Turtle. This one starts with a nice funky Rhodes vamp again. It's kind of the signature of this album.
Not very turtle-like, I just want to say. I don't know where they got that title from.
Yeah.
Okay.
The melody is doubled on the trumpet in the Rhodes with kind of little question and answer type phrases that moves around with a contrasting lyrical section. Allure's solo here has a lot of varied articulation, a mix of lines that build tension outside the chords, along with prettier, more major-sounding melodic lines. Chevalier milks the funky distortion sound of the Rhodes here with fat, heavy chords and funky, bluesy, rhythmic right-hand figures in his solo. Zelnick keeps a good groove that's funky with punchy bass lines, and the drum fills by Martin Charrière are kind of decorative and fill things out nicely. Track 3, Sun, Sun, Sun. Again, funky alternating chords and groovy bass make a cool intro for this one. Allure's trumpet melody is rhythmic to fit in the groove with some lyrical sections as well. They go around the melody twice. I like how he really navigates the chords in his solo here. He uses phrases that have a lot of intervals in them as well. And he takes interesting chances in his solos. That's one thing I like about his approach. But he always finds kind of a satisfying resolution. To me, that's a mark of an exciting soloist, someone who when they're improvising, creating lines at the moment, maybe paints themselves into a difficult place with some choices of notes, and then finds a neat way to resolve those. So you say, oh, of course. And so I feel like he's a player that finds excitement by challenging himself with his kind of melodic development. Chevalier has some added funk with a delay on his solo that's really cool. It can get some extra kind of rhythmic pauses and feels using that effect. He also has some cool outside figures and intricate rhythms in his solo. After they repeat the melody, they vamp off on alternating riff at the end to give the drums a bit of a spot before they close things out. Track 4 is Ballad for N, and here we get some of the vocalizations of Camille Bartol that start on the melody over just the bass for this kind of slow waltzing ballad tune. Then Allure doubles up the melody when they repeat it, and the Rhodes and drums come in. Bartol has a vocalization solo that sounds very mysterious and more instrumental than vocal in quality. Kind of interesting. Allure has a relaxed and lyrical trumpet solo before joining with Bartol again for the melody. So it's very pretty and spacious, and they're doing a lot of this in unison, which takes a nice sense of pitch and skill to get voice and trumpet to be in tune as well as they are here. So a lot of control to play this pretty number. Track 5 is Tobo. This is another Rhodes chord intro for another tune with a straight beat. Allure plays the simple kind of intervallic melody. When he comes in on his solo, it's bluesy with heart attacks, but he contrasts it with a return to the sweeter melody, and he continues with lighter phrases before pushing it harder and getting outside the chords for a bit of adventure. The sections alternate again, and he matches the mood, either soft or intense. Chevalier's solo is funky, also harmonically cool with rising modulating lines in it. All this over good bass grooves and nice cymbal work on the drums under here. So very interesting tune. Let's see. What do we have here? How's your French?
Il y a 3 ans, which means 3 years ago.
3 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Lilting melody. This one's got a 6/8 beat feel to it. Allure shows off a nice lyrical sense on this melody. Chevalier's solo comes first, and he uses that cool delay effect again. This one's filled with creative rhythmic figures that really build to a climax. Allure keeps it warm in the lower register to start on his solo. He works up to some flurrying lines and interesting ideas that work through the chords, and then he ties it back into the melody going to the end of the tune. 7, Rue Visconti. It's a mysterious slow bass intro. Allure joins in over the bass with the pretty melody. Cymbals swelling lightly and the piano adds some chords. Chevalier plays a delicate solo focusing on articulation with some fanciful runs. And Allure's solo is warm with lyrical and some staccato phrases for variety. This is a very classy, well-played ballad. And track 8, finishing things up, is called Traffic. This one starts with a kind of tentative rubato intro melody that emphasizes chromatic tension between a G and A flat tones. Things change up into a section with some complex rhythms, fast trumpet figures before they return to the first figure. Allure starts his solo softly, but he builds it up with chromatic figures and rhythms. Chevalier is funky and harmonically free on his solo here, and makes this piece kind of exciting. So that closes it out. I thought it's a nice collection of original tunes. It's mostly straight beat and funky in concept, which fits the Rhodes grooves perfectly. Allure's playing is a good mix of both funky trumpet playing and lyrical lines, and Chevalier shows off a great concept for using the sound of the Rhodes creatively in this material. And bass and drum work is tight and also inspiring to the solos. So overall, everything fits together nicely. And I thought kind of exciting, young and up-and-coming trumpet player.
Yeah, I thought so too. I mean, I think, well, for you probably wanted to hear the trumpet player, but for me, Chivaillon was the main draw. But the Allure's bright sound really drew me in. I really liked his tone throughout, and the funkiness of this album also kind of got me. I like anything funky, really.
Yeah.
Chivaillon makes the distorted Rhodes sound appealing. I had to kind of accept that was going to be the whole album at first, because I liked the other album that he did so much at first, that when it came out, that we did it last year, that I wanted to hear more of him doing that, and you don't get a chance to hear that here. But of course, we'll hear more from him in the future. Let me see. Yeah, this album held my interest throughout. I liked it. Like with the which one was it from last week? The Pedro Martinez. Who was? I can't remember. I can't remember. Anyway, the tracks were all like taut and pretty short, and I feel like the ensemble could have stretched out more.
Right.
Like they were really sort of. It felt like the ideas could have really expanded out, and I guess they had like a limit as to how much they were gonna.
Yeah, everything
solo for the recording
is under 6 minutes. There's nothing that's really extended. So.
Yeah, but if the soloing's really, really good, I'm really happy to hear like
right.
a 12-minute track or something like that.
Yeah.
And it sounded like that would have been the case here.
Yeah. Anyway, we'll look forward to hearing more from Allure. I like his playing. It's adventurous, but also he shows enough restraint. He holds back, so you want to constantly hear more from him, and he uses a lot of space in his solo lines. So he has a mature concept.
Those French have an interesting musical take on the higher forms, classical and jazz.
For sure. All right, we're going to stay in Europe and go over to the Netherlands for the next one with I thought a fabulous trumpet player, Lut van der Lee.
Okay.
The Lut van der Lee Quartet, with his new release called Both Sides, and this is on A Records. So van der Lee was born in Bochum, Netherlands, 1968, so he's about in our age bracket. He graduated from Hilversum Conservatory, and then he went and also studied in the U.S. With Brian Lynch, Wynton Marsalis, and one of my favorite trumpet players, Jim Rotundi. Also he got some coaching from Bobby Shu, one of the great trumpet players. And he's performed in a lot of groups internationally with big names, Lee Thornburn, Roy Hargrove, Benny Golson, and tons of others, Lee Konitz, Vincent Herring, Diego Orcola, another trumpet player we heard. So he's got an impressive resume internationally, and here he is with this recording, Both Sides, I guess, showing off kind of a more lyrical nature and a harder side of his playing. So on this recording, van der Lee's on trumpet and flugelhorn. The rest of the musicians on bass, Johan Plump, drums.
Some good names in this ensemble.
Yeah. Joost Kessler, Martin Vink, two drummers, guitar, Jesse Van Ruler, piano, Robert Jan, I guess this is, Robert Jan Vermeulen. Tenor sax, there's two players, Dave Barlow and, let's see if we can, this one's a little tough, Sored Dikwizen.
There you go.
All right.
I don't know.
And got some vocals here.
That.
Vocals here too, Faye Klassen. And actually, thanks to Faye, there's not a lot of album notes available online. So Lute, you might put these up on your website, especially when you've got multiple sax players and multiple drummers.
Right.
Actually,
it's hard to know who's who.
Faye on her website has some reflections on this recording, and she points out, so I picked up some extra material, but I'm going to give you both one correction on a tune that is not attributed correctly. We've actually talked about it on the podcast before, but we'll get there when we go along.
So you got another one of these Japanese composers?
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
Same one, yeah.
Same
anyway,
track.
we start...
Body and Soul, okay, yeah.
No, not that one. Nope.
No. Which one is it?
The last tune. We'll get there. So we start with the title track, Both Sides. It's a not too slow ballad, and Vanderly starts right out with the melody that features some relaxed, repeated notes and helps set the laid-back mood. He has a really big, warm sound. Nice little touch of vibrato in his playing, and his solo after the melody is very melodic as well. Lots of pauses between phrases. Gives you time to digest his beautiful melodic ideas. I like how he leaves unresolved phrases hanging to give you expectations of what's next. He's composing nice ideas in his solo. Jan Vermeulen has a tasty piano solo as well. Per Vanderly comes back with some doodles into the melody again, and he finishes with a nice trumpet flourish. So we're off to a tasty start. Track 2, Bougali. This is I guess it's original tune, but it's very much in the style of Lee Morgan Blue Note funky post-bop tunes from all of those albums like Sidewinder and like that back in the 60s, featuring bluesy and snaking horn lines. First out of the gate is a bluesy tenor sax solo. I believe this is by Dave Barlow. It's got lots of double time phrases through it, and he gets a lot of time to stretch out on it. There's a nice change of groove in the rhythm section as a transition interlude to Vanderly's solo. It gets back to the funky beat, and Vanderly shows he's absorbed Lee Morgan's spirit with lots of sassy half-valve notes and high-note bravura phrases. There's another little transition back to the fun melody. This one will put you in a good mood. Very funky Blue Note 60s type stuff here. Track 3, Honesty. Not the Billy Joel's tune.
I was wondering myself. I saw that name. I was like, this is sounding Billy Joel.
Original. A ballad that starts with flugelhorn over guitar and bass. Drums sit out on this tune, totally. Vanderly is warm and fluffy on the pretty melody that has a lot of nice interplay with the guitar. A breathy tenor by, here's this guy's name that's really hard to say. Sword Dickerson. Sorry.
Go for it, man. I can't help you here.
I really have with that. Joins in. I got this from the vocalist's website, because otherwise I wouldn't know who's playing tenor. But anyway, the tenor comes in to take over the melody. Vanderly comes back for a solo. It's melodic and lyrical, even when he blows through his fast lines. And then the tenor comes back for a more relaxed solo, punctuated with a few nicely accented phrases. Vanderly comes back to tie it up into the melody once more and takes a lovely short cadenza before the final note. Really nice ballad playing on this album. 4, Tip and Brown. It's a fast-swinging hard bop tune with challenging unison horn line that picks up into the tune and has some stop time sections. The horns get a breather with the piano solo up first. They repeat part of the melody, and then Vanderly is up. He shows off his speedy bop chops here and also gets some high-energy phrases into the upper register. The trumpet and piano then trade off before getting back to the melody. There's no sax solo on this one. Interestingly, on Faye Clausen's website, it says the tenor sax is played by Jan Menu, who's not listed on the other ones. So I don't know if he's just a guest for the melody or if she's wrong. Anyway, if you have the CD, you can figure it out. Number 5 is I Need You. This is Vanderlei's original tune, and he also wrote the lyrics for this song, too. It's another pretty ballad. Vanderleij comes in on the flugelhorn on the intro with some vocalizations by Faye Klassen to start out before she gets to the lyrics. She continues on with more vocalizations after the verse. Vanderleij comes in under her and continues on for a smooth solo. Next is a piano solo by Jan Vermeulen, and there's nice drum work underneath everything here, dividing up the beat and making tasty fills. Klassen comes back for the final verse, and there's some nice interplay and harmonization between her and Vanderleij. Again, another classy ballad tune, and it's cool that he writes lyrics for his tunes too, so that's nice. Track 6, Body and Soul, the old jazz standard. This is, a tune that he's probably inspired by Freddie Hubbard's version, as most. I can hear a lot of Freddie Hubbard and Lee Morgan in his trumpet style. And this one, I like, he starts out with just flugelhorn and guitar. Van Ruler keeps a nice swing bounce to his accompaniment that pushes the tune along, so it doesn't bog down into ballad territory here. Vanderleij plays melodically and real beautiful things, and Van Ruler takes a solo himself while keeping the harmony going along underneath, and also gets some nice tasty double stops on the guitar. He's a really tasty guitarist. Vanderleij comes back for the melody and a nice gentle cadenza. This tune, this guitar and flugelhorn, it's like a warm caramel sundae or something. It's all really warm and tasty. 7, Secret Prayers. This one, the note said it was inspired by Lee Morgan's Search for the New Land, which is a really cool album and tune from his catalog. The solo trumpet intro comes in until drums, bass, and guitar join in on the rubato phrases. I think this is a different drummer. Martin Vink is on this one. The tune takes off into a loping bluesy swing for just a bit before it returns to the rubato intro idea. Then it launches into a much faster section. Vanderleij blows out some fast screaming phrases. It settles back once more. There's a pause. A funky bass riff gets things going once more on a new even beat groove. Vanderleij solos over the new groove. He uses some half-valving, fluttering, and harmonic exploration with some Freddie Hubbard-like high-register intense phrases. The groove changes up to fast swing and settles again before they get back to the funky bass resetting for guitar solo, where Van Ruler shows off some fast chops. Once more back to the melody section, where Vanderleij gets some screaming phrases in on the race to the end. So lots of rhythmic changes in this tune. Keeps you on your toes. Track 8, There Goes My Heart. Faye Klassen is back again on this tune. This is interesting. Very famous song that Nat King Cole sang, and also later was a hit by a singer named Joni James, both in ballad versions, but here it's a speedy swing version. Vanderleij has his harmon mute in for some doodles with the sax under Klassen's lyrics. Dave Barlow on tenor sax is up for a solo right away after the verse over the bouncy bass and guitar chords, and Vanderleij is next swinging along with really acrobatic phrases and some false fingering fun on this solo. Van Ruler gets some fast swinging solo as well before Klassen returns for the final verse. So this album has enough ballads on it, so here they take a ballad and they do it in a kind of fast swinging way that's freshening it up. Track 9, Johannes Waltz. This is written by the German piano player Frank Wunsch. Extended rubato piano intro here. Some very pretty runs that gets joined by the bass and drums to a medium waltz. Vanderleij blows the pretty melody on flugelhorn. Tenor joins in on the second section, an octave lower. Johann Plomp gets his first bass solo of the album, and it's thick and melodic. And Vanderlei has a great solo here. Starts off soft and mellow, but works up an intensity with some topsy-turvy phrases that end with a nice hanging phrase that hands things off to the tenor sax. And then Vanderlei and the tenor take out the melody to end the tune. And we're going to end things up with track 10, Desert Moonlight. And now we heard this tune back on Louis Hay's Crisis in episode 45.
I want to ask you about this. The way they've written it here is Desert Moonlight. Is that the actual title? Or
no, it's Desert.
It is Desert.
It's
just misspelled.
Misspelled here, I believe.
I see. No, because it's on Deezer and it's on like the internet like this too.
I think it's just misspelled.
Okay.
But as was credited, I believe, on the Louis Hay's and originally to Lee Morgan, who recorded this on his famous album from 1965, Rump Roller. And Clausen's site refers to it as one of his best compositions, but he didn't write this tune.
Wait, he actually said it was one of his best compositions. He didn't write it?
No,
God.
She said it was one of Lee Morgan's best compositions. And I believe, it was just listed as his composition on that original recording, so most people believe that it was a Lee Morgan composition. But play this to any Japanese, and right away they're going to tell you, Tsuki no Sabaku, which is a Japanese tune. I believe this goes back to like the 1930s or so. I mentioned the exact history of it on the previous episode we did, but it's written by composers.
Previous episode.
Suguru Sasaki, who wrote this tune, and it became sort of not like a folk song, but a widespread song in the culture that all children came to know. And Tsuki no Sabaku actually would mean the desert moon, or like the moon on the desert, not desert moonlight. So it's a little bit different meaning. Anyway, you can find the original recordings of this song on YouTube and whatnot. I mean, Japanese versions to prove it to yourself. So I think,
what would you type in on YouTube to hear it?
Tsuki no Sabaku.
Tsuki no Sabaku.
Yeah. Tsuki-no-Sabaku.
Okay.
You can also look it up in Wikipedia or anywhere to find it out. Anyway, Lee Morgan took a melody that he heard somewhere, maybe when he was on tour in Japan or something, and made it into a jazz version. Here, with Vanderlei, it starts with just a tenor and trumpet for an intro of the melody. It gets passed off to guitar for an interlude. They play through the whole melody, which works up to a driving swing in the middle. Things idle over the bass while Vanderlei starts his solo with some trilling, and the rhythm forms up again and then drives ahead over the walking bass. Vanderlei half-valve squeezes out some notes and keeps the trills going along through his lines. He works into a rhythmic idea that gets picked up by other players. The guitar gets a solo and a relaxed swinging tenor sax solo here too. Vanderlei joins in on a repeated riff at the end of the sax solo that starts some solo time for the drums, segueing back to the melody. And that ends out this recording. So I have to say, Vanderlei is a fabulous trumpet player. He has great chops, excellent taste in his solo playing. A very warm, pleasing sound on ballads, and sort of this different personality and tonality on flugelhorn. He can get really screaming on trumpet and forceful when he wants to. This recording's got a lot of variety in the material, especially the ballad numbers, and his flugelhorn playing are lovely. So I think he's a trumpet player that should be more widely heard, and I'd put him right up in the top of players out there today.
Yeah, each of the tracks on this album are highly involved. There's a lot of activity going on in all of them. I wrote like extremely long notes for each one. I just was picking out all these little details that I was hearing. So it's sort of there's a lot for the ear on this album, I think. So I would if you're that kind of person who really likes this ear buffet of sounds. There's certainly a lot of that. The drums, it's kind of interesting. He gets a few solos, but he doesn't really overpower
no,
the listener. And I'm wondering if he's just back in the mix or something, because I think he would normally be louder if he played the way he did, if I was in a club. But otherwise, yeah, I thought this was really interesting. Really, again, a lot of really interesting detail for me. So that whole The Pleasure Centers were hit in a lot of different places.
Okay. Yeah, it's melodically satisfying, and I think any trumpet player is listening, you're going to appreciate his trumpet ability and concept. He's a really good trumpet player with technique and style. So check it out.
Yeah. And
finally, something a little bit different.
Oh, yeah. This was different. All right.
We've got Canadian-born trumpet player who I understood spent a lot of time in California or in the San Francisco area before coming to Brooklyn.
Oh.
But we're not using New York accents anymore.
My hometown. No more New York accents. My brother insulted us, so we're not just going to give you the pleasure of hearing our New York accents anymore.
So he moved to Brooklyn in 2019, making it into the New York scene. And he's gotten some recognition in Downbeat magazine, called a resourceful improviser who writes vivid episodic themes, and made a list of 25 trumpeters for the future. Speaking of, Darren Johnston and his latest release, Life in Time, on Origin Records. And I have to say, this also has a very unusual album cover.
I'm trying to think of what it was now.
It's a young boy.
Oh, right. Okay.
Under the bleachers with sort of painted face makeup with an angry expression, holding a toy gun. So check it out. I don't know if that's Johnston when he was a youngster, or what it refers to, but it's very interesting. The preview,
not completely out of line with what you're going to hear, by the way. So
anyway, so this album I picked up because it's something interesting. Johnston on trumpet, Jeff Bradfield on tenor and soprano saxes, also bass clarinet, which whenever I see bass clarinet, I'm going to give it a listen.
And he plays satisfyingly. We'll get to it when it happens, but he plays satisfying in the low range of the bass clarinet, complete with reed honks at the bottom, and I love that.
Clark Summers on bass, Dana Hall on drums, and no one on piano, and no one on guitar. So that's the point here. We've got a quartet with no harmony instrument. Of course, this is nothing new. Going back, Sonny Rollins did a lot of kind of playing without piano, and you had some cool jazz groups, Jerry Mulligan, Chet Baker, playing without piano or guitar chord instrument. So that always opens up a lot of harmonic freedom here. So I was expecting a kind of free type of improvising, and that is here. But what intrigued me and made me choose this was I was surprised at the level of excellent compositions, and also the use of the sparse instrumentation for bigger effects of sound in the arrangement than would be implied by just what's here. And so the more I listen to this recording, the more it grows on me.
I think that's going to be the case with me too. There's a lot of variety in the approaches to each track too. Yeah. It's a very, well, I should talk about this at the end, but it was more of an intellectual album, I thought.
Exactly. Yeah. So they're doing a lot with this sparse instrumentation and using the possibilities of interplay to bring out the most of what's going on. and there's a lot of variety in the compositions. So let's get into it. Track 1, Asherah. This is a minor slinking melody in 5/4 time. Johnston starts it out alone over just the bass. The second time around, sax and drums come in, and then the horns split into differently arranged lines with some unison parts. Johnston plays a solo that leaves lots of expectant spaces in it, and he hints at enough of the chords that if you've listen to what he's doing and the bass, your brain will fill in what the rest of the harmonic ideas are. So just this outline gives you enough direction of the harmonic movement of the music. Bradfield solos as well, with more rapid lines on the tenor sax, and then Summers has some extended time to work on the bass. The horns come in for some backing lines twice before coming back together to finish up with the melody. That's one of the things I liked about this album. There's no harmony instrument, so sometimes here, behind the bass, you could just let the bass doodle on his own, but they've got some, composed, organized backing harmonic lines with the horns to back that. I thought it's a nice touch of arranging. Track 2, Little Goldfish. This one has a soprano sax and a plunger muted trumpet. Johnston likes to use a plunger, which is cool. Maybe he's making a comeback with some modern players again. And this combination has some unique lines with some unison parts on the tricky, syncopated, quirky melody over staggered bass and drum hits. Bradfield solos first on soprano over the changing beat of the bass and drums. It's loose, but it hangs together smartly somehow. Johnston solos next, and Bradfield adds backing lines. And then Johnston gets some flurrying ideas mixed in among bright major melodic ideas. The horns trade off sections with the drums before heading out with the quirky melody again. Track 3.
I want to just mention this whole track has kind of an odd sound to it. There's something kind of, I said old timey about it.
Yeah.
It's not just the rhythm; it's the whole, the entire picture that you get. Even the snare drum on the drums, it kind of has this kind of odd blap sound, like the strings are kind of loosened on the bottom or something, but it doesn't even sound like that. I don't know how he got that sound.
You're right. Old-timey or something kind of nostalgic, but through a different lens. Yeah. Right. I got that feeling too.
Yeah.
Track 3 is Intention and Commitment. This is starts with a loping 6/8 bass ostinato line, bass clarinet, and more plunger muted trumpet bring in the mysterious minor melody. The beat changes up in the middle section over bass triplet figures before returning to the ostinato kind of feel. Bradfield solos first on the bass clarinet. He gets down low to some really resonant notes between other fluid melodic phrases. Hall plays lots of textured rhythms behind it. Johnston uses the plunger for his solo, getting some real plunged trill effects and cries here. There's a problem with his plumbing. He gets all the pipes cleaned out.
No worries there.
Yeah. And Bradfield backs with some rhythmic figures that Johnston incorporates into his solo. So they're really listening to each other and having good interplay. And then the theme slinks back in to finish it up. But I like to hear that bass clarinet.
Yeah, me too.
Get down there, yeah. 4, Life in Time, the title track. Tenor and trumpet trade lines together with the drum phrases to get started, and then we're off for a drum solo with a few bass hits mixed in with it. Johnston comes back for a solo, and the drums drop out for a bit before joining back in. The beat shifts around for a while before a driving swing develops with a hard walking bass line. Bradfield solos next, and Summers switches up the bass in sections from the fast walk and offbeat half-time patterns. The horns come back in together to trade with the drums again, playing around the minor melody, and it ends up on a Picardy third, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting, like I said, there's a lot of interesting elements on this album. I made a comment here. I just want to kind of mention now after track 3, we just talked about track 4.
Right.
But that's a 7-minute long track. And I said that it seemed to go on for a longer time, but not because I was uninterested or bored by it. You know, I wasn't like, when is this going to end? But it was more because all the elements are so unique and you're just kind of wondering where it's going to go next. And it just seems to sort of stretch out more. And you realize it's only 7 minutes long. I was thinking, has this been going on for like 12 minutes already? What's going on?
Yeah.
It was an odd sensation for me. I don't think I've ever had that experience listening to music before. Something seeming longer than it really is, and not because it was boring, for some other reason.
Right.
You know, that's because it was interesting. I was kind of like intrigued. You know, it just seemed to stretch time for me.
Yeah. There's a lot of spontaneity and creativity inside of what they've mapped out in these tunes, I think.
Yeah.
The next tune is track 5, Lost and Found. This one clocks in over 8 minutes here. It's a bass intro that leads into a lyrical rubato minor horn lines over drum fills and the bass beat. The bass picks it up again with a solo over light but busy drum work. Johnston comes in on a slower tempo with a somber-themed solo that develops some rhythmic interplay with the bass as the drums kind of swell underneath that. And then Johnston works in some open interval phrases into the upper register before ending his solo. The bass and drums pause as Bradfield starts his solo on sax, and the bass then adding kind of rumbling figures under the soft phrases, and Bradfield gets out some sax overtones among his lines. The horns come back for the theme, with room for some drum rumbling, swelling underneath, and punctuated bass. The next track, 6, Shade. This has fast, skittish horn lines in unison that start out. The bass changes up the beat by alternating between fast walking and then a Spanish-like alternating chord ostinato kind of pattern. Johnston solos first, navigating the changing beat and playing against the rhythm with phrases and repeated notes. Bradford's more lyrical on his solo on tenor sax here, and Summers ups for more spaced out bass notes before picking up the speed again. The horns trade solo phrases with Hall on drums before returning to the nervous theme that winds down at the end. Kind of interesting influences in this one. Track 7. Guimarães?
I guess.
It's a city in Portugal, or a region, okay. I think.
Guimarães.
This is pretty harmonized rubato ballad theme on tenor and trumpet. Bass and cymbals fill out the ends of phrases. There aren't any individual solo sections here, but the horns kind of add improvised lines together as they work through the ebbing and flowing phrases to the end. Different kind of approach, but working together straight through the tune. One of the shorter tunes here, just about 4.5 minutes. But I like the kind of this ebb and flow, kind of like a breath, breathing and holding and then exhaling through it. Track 8, 2 words that don't seem to go together. Locomotive Sunflower.
Yeah.
Interesting. Here we're back to the nice combination of bass clarinet and plunger muted trumpet on this kind of comical melody that alternates fast figures and then longer squeezed notes in the case of the plunger. There's a bass solo first with the horns playing cool harmonized backing figures. Another thing example of what I was mentioning about nice arrangements. Bradfield solos on bass clarinet, swinging his phrases and mixing in some tonguing cross rhythm figures. Johnston again plunges his way through the solo with some squeezes and growls, but outlines nice melodic phrases too. And Hall has some drum solo time over the bass before they repeat the lively, fun melody. Track 9. A long title, the color of the wall of the room that reminded me. Reminded me of what? I don't know.
Oh, yeah, they don't say.
It's a long track. On this one, the bass starts a groove over a straight drum beat that has some rim clicks in it. The horns play the tricky syncopated minor melody line that has lots of interval jumps incorporated in it. Sometimes they're in unison, sometimes in harmony, working up to some rather dissonant, close intervals. Johnson starts his solo with bluesy minor phrases over the syncopated hits that the bass clarinet joins in on. He gets in a section of cool, bluesy, raspy lines before the time breaks, and he finishes up passing on to Bradfield, who gets some raspy charm in his own minor kind of modal lines. Johnson comes back in, and then the horns work a syncopated minor vamp hits kind of theme as a backing for a drum solo from Hall. There's some rubato horn exchange and bass to finish out the tune coming out of that vamp of the drums. And we finish it up 10, Song for Kamala. It's a softly swinging unison waltz melody on tenor and harmon muted trumpet with harmonized ends of phrases. Hall adds only the lightest and slightest of cymbal hits behind this. Bradfield solos gently over the bass. Hall gradually adds more brush textures and rhythms as Bradfield gets more accented in his solo. Johnson plays a harmon muted solo, hitting some nice triplet figures and double time lines along the way, and Summers gets some space for just his bass to play before they all return for the melody that ends on an unresolved interval. So I found myself
to end an album.
Yeah, it's strange, but I found myself drawn into this pianoless kind of space that they've created here. Johnson's crafted interesting, sometimes quirky tunes, but the instruments really make the most of the four musicians with the addition of soprano sax, bass clarinet, and his own mutes, creating lots of tonal variety within this ensemble. And the group has really good interplay, a sense of freeness in time. The drum and bass don't always keep a strict beat. There's a lot of looseness in there, but it does lock in when it should. So it has that kind of breathing time quality to it. And as I said, attention to arrangements, making a lot out of just four instruments. It's a little unusual, but intellectual, satisfying, and I got more out of it the second and third time I listened to it than the first time. It's one of those kind of recordings, maybe a bit of a challenge for some listeners, but I think it's well worth your time. And I think Johnson has a lot going for him, in not only as a trumpet player, but as a composer and maybe concept kind of creator with this ensemble.
Oh, yeah, I think this album needs more than one listen to really be appreciated. So I would encourage listeners just not to give up after one listen. It is sort of intellectual. There are plenty of exciting moments on it. For me, most of them involving the bass clarinet, but that would be the case with me, wouldn't it? I really just love the sound of that instrument, and just any low reeds. I just love them so much. Yeah, not what you expect. And like I said, it tends to expand time as you listen to it, as so many unexpected things happen. Just different, just odd combinations of instruments. You wonder what they're going to sound like together. Yeah. Or like the very last thing you hear, an unresolved like false cadence at the end. It's just kind of a false cadence, and then it just ends.
Hangs there,
and you're supposed to go off into your day, I guess, after that, or go to bed, or whatever you're doing. Yeah. But definitely one for the head. Not. Well, I don't want to say not for the heart, but it does tend to appeal more to the head. Yeah. So give it more than one listen, I would say, if you're really into this sort of thing. I found it. Yeah, it was a bit of a challenge, but I was warming to it myself after a second listen.
Yeah. So there you go. There's your trumpet variety. You've got some funky Rhodes and French trumpet, some dreamy Dutch, and abstract American.
That, don't you?
Yeah. Abstract American.
Abstract American.
Yeah, so you should be all horned up at the end of this episode.
Horned up.
All horned up. After a saxy week last week, you're going to be all horned up. And
we should have done this one first, then you'd be all horned up for the saxy week next week.
And what's coming up next week? Are we going to do keyboards?
We got piano, right? So next week's going to be piano. Yeah.
Right. All right.
Now I've got next week. I've got Angela Hewitt's last recording of her Beethoven sonatas cycle, and then I have two very unusual piano recitals coming, and I think I think that it'll really intrigue listeners. Okay. So you got one very famous composer, and then a bunch of unknowns after that. I like one of the comments I got for this podcast from someone I work with was that she was listening to it. And she said, "I didn't know there were so many composers I didn't know."
Oh, there you go.
Because I think a lot of people think, I'm still getting the people apologizing to me for liking Vivaldi The Four Seasons because they think it's not cool. I like The Four Seasons, sure. But it's just kind of you just want to branch out a lot. I think you don't want to stick to the you want to know all the music by the great composers, of course, but you really want to branch out from there and hear and know that this is still a form that's being actively practiced, not only by musicians but by composers as well. Right, as we heard today. Yeah.
Okay, well, that's cool. I've got a long and growing list. There's more piano recordings in jazz than anything else.
Right.
And I've got to bust some of these out there. So
this is perfect then, yeah.
Yeah, I will pick out three which I find most inspiring and add them. And so we'll feature the keyboards next week and get ready for that.
So I hope you enjoyed this episode. It certainly was a horn of plenty. A cornucopia, you might say.
A hornucopia. Oh, that's terrible. We better end this before we make any bad
No, we're not going to use that as the title. There's no way. No.
No way. Not at all. All right. So this has been episode 53 of Adult Music, the podcast with music for the mature mind. Get your sax fix, your trumpet tricks, and next week on to keyboards. Every week, 6 new releases in classical and jazz to listen to. As we said, please take a moment. If you've made it to the end here, do subscribe or follow. If you haven't yet, give us a ranking, write a review on whatever service you're on. We'd appreciate it. And find us on Facebook if you'd like to leave a message or comment, or write to us on email. Our address is adultmusicpodcast, all one word, @gmail.com. And we'll be back again next week for episode 54. So until then, keep listening.